She got pregnant, but not from me. It was 2011 when me and my ex-wife, at the time girlfriend, decided to come to a different country temporarily, mostly to have an international experience, to learn languages, cultures, etc. We spent part of 2011 and most of 2012 studying languages and working, until we had to go back to our home country due to a member of the family passing away. Also at that time, we got married, but just on paper. We didn't have any parties or ceremonies since we didn't have any money to spare. Studying abroad is very expensive. During the time we spent back home, we took several steps towards building a couple's life or a family, such as refurbishing my old apartment, buying furniture. We even received several gifts from friends because they were so excited that we decided to stay. At least, that's what I thought. Rebuilding the apartment was a saga by itself. In order to be able to provide, I created from scratch a real estate agency with my mom. We worked really hard and I was working a lot, which is a good thing. Because of that, I was able to finish the apartment, bought the ex a car, and bought myself a motorcycle. We had good friends and good people around us. Besides some minor things, I was living the life. On a note here that I almost forgot, her mom, my ex-mother-in-law, helped us with the apartment, as she was also excited for us. She paid for all the cabinets and all the paint jobs. This will be important later. It was mid-2013 when she started to complain about our home country and our current life. I couldn't understand it. From my point of view, everything was great. We had a great life and a great future. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to go back to the country and city that we visited as students in temporary residence. At first, I refused. I had a vision, a glimpse of the future. My business was doing great, and we had our family and friends around. She wanted more. She wasn't satisfied with all that, even though she was also becoming very successful in her line of work. So she gave me an ultimatum. We either emigrate as a couple, or she would do it alone. Of course, I gave up on everything I had, packed up my stuff, and emigrated with her. Of course, it's not that simple to emigrate. Her and I were both law bachelors. Our diplomas weren't accepted for immigration. So one of us had to come as a student, and the other as a worker. So we made an arrangement. I took all the money I had and paid for the travel and first semester costs, as for first expenses, furniture, etc. She transferred her car to her mom's name so she could sell it and send us the money to pay for school. She would work, and I would study full-time. She was doing exactly what I did for her while we were back in our home country. I was working and covering most of the expenses, and she was training and studying. But this time, I was studying. She was covering most of the expenses. But I was also helping, as I rented my apartment and still had some revenue from the agency. One of the first things we did after arriving was finding a place to live. We put some furniture in and opened a joint bank account. I'd like to take the time to also explain that I wasn't just naive. I was also very, very young at the time. She was just a half year older than I was. We found an apartment almost immediately, as we had friends living in the same building. We became door-to-door neighbors. It was great. Our friends were also a couple, and from the same country that we were from, so naturally we spent a lot of time together. The first 2 or 3 months were nice. I was studying, she was working, I was enjoying my studies. We were already talking about the future, such as next steps on the immigration process, about next steps in our life, having kids and such. I was adamant on having kids only after the whole immigration process was done, as we would be able to afford it, and our future in this country was uncertain. She agreed. During that time, we would throw some LAN parties as we were both gamers. I'd cook, we'd drink and play games. It was great. Most of our friends were gamers too, as we both used to work on a game testing company back in 2012, and she was still working the industry to that day. She invited a couple of coworkers for one of those parties. They seemed to be nice people. I even gave one of my winter jackets to one of her friends, who we'll call Dick, short for Richard, of course. Winter here is pretty intense, and Dick didn't have any winter clothes, so I gave him the spare jacket I had. From time to time, we would go out with her coworkers, all couples, except for Dick. I was never comfortable with him. I never liked him, but I would tolerate him as he was part of her group of friends. She would always complain about stuff he did or said. At this point, I started to see the signs. I started to become depressed as the distance between us grew bigger each day. I tried to fight for our marriage, but it seemed like she didn't care. The only thing that I could think about was all the bits, pieces, and situations we had to endure to get to where we were. I thought about our families, our friends, all the gifts and wishes that we received, all the good deeds from people that helped us. Why would she throw this away? My depression grew bigger. I became super focused on my studies and on my crafts. I was alone most of the time as my thoughts ate me alive. I tried everything at this point, and I was becoming exhausted. One day, she comes home after work and goes for a walk with our neighbor's wife. I knew it was coming. She broke up with me when she got back. I was never a guy that would easily cry, but I cried like a baby that day. When I was a bit calmer, I called my parents. That made me cry even more because I missed them so much. I went to bed crying, couldn't sleep, and ended up crying throughout the whole night. The next morning, I had a panic attack during class. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. My vision was blurry. I could barely walk. I went to the infirmary, and there wasn't anyone there. I really thought that I was going to die that day. I laid down on the couch there and passed out. I woke up to the nurse assessing me, and I got the assurance that I was physically fine. I went home that day and stayed there, typed the divorce documents, signed it, and just stayed there, doing nothing, just thinking. That day was the very last time that I saw my ex. A few days passed by, maybe 3 or 4, and I woke up to a weird dream that I had. During my dream, my neighbor's wife was telling me that my ex was expecting a baby girl. I had another panic attack. During that same day, I found out that she was already official with Dick. A friend in common texted me the details since they both deleted and blocked me from social media. She never admitted to cheating on me to anyone, but she was already pregnant at that time, and it wasn't mine. That same day, I got a call from the bank saying that my ex signed the papers to close the account and that I needed to go there to sign it too. The bank account was empty. She even had the audacity of texting me to ask for money for rent and utilities. Besides the $60 I had in my wallet, that was all the money I had left. I was livid and desperate. I didn't know what to do. Luckily, my parents were able to send me a couple $100s, and that's what I used to move out. I offered her to buy me out of the apartment, meaning that she would buy my half of the furniture, and she got offended. We never talked again, as I was livid. I changed my phone number and deleted and blocked all means of communication with her. I was able to move out, to the worst place I ever lived in, with all my furniture using the money that my parents sent. But I have to admit, I was eating just once a day because I didn't have the money to do anything else, and I was way too ashamed of my naivete and situation to ask for more help. During that month, I noticed the number of friends I had on my social media was decreasing. I asked around and found out that for each group of friends that we had in common, she told a different story and a different lie, all to her favor, of course. They went from, he's impotent, to, I was afraid that he was going to kill me. I understood that she was trying to justify what she did to me to keep her friends and justify the cheating. Of course, it pissed me off, but what really got me flabbergasted is that some people actually believed her. People that I once considered family believed that I was capable of doing such things. It really broke my heart again. Some of our friends in common didn't buy her lies and texted me saying that it's clear what happened and I wasn't capable of the actions she was telling everyone. I was livid. I think I was never that angry before or after in my life, but in the end, I did nothing about it. I came to the conclusion that the people that believed her without talking to me were never really my friends, regardless of my feelings or consideration towards them. I also had bigger problems in my hands. How was I supposed to pay for my studies now? The time to pay up the school was coming, and I had no idea what to do. Nevertheless, my ex-mother-in-law texted me asking me to pay her up for the cabinets and paint job that she paid for in my apartment. Basically, she was asking me to pay her back for a gift, but fine, let's do it. I explained to her what was going on with me, all the details, the slander, how her daughter and I had an agreement, that I was only in this situation because of what she did to me, how she did it, and that she got all my money. And that, after hearing all of it, if she still wants to be paid, that I would find a way to pay her back even if it takes my whole life to do it. The only answer I got was, oh, never mind that then. I loved my ex-mother-in-law as a true member of my family, and I still only have positive feelings towards her. I remember it like it was yesterday, the day that a miracle happened in my life. I was actually in a calculus class trying to figure out how to pay the school, calculating what I could and could not do, when I received a message from my sister. A company that owed me money finally paid up. I had no hope whatsoever on collecting that money. They paid up the exact amount that I needed. It was during my most financially desperate time that they decided to pay. I can only consider this a miracle. What are the odds? I hope none of you ever experienced this amount of frustration, desperation, and anger that I felt ever in your lives, and I mean it. I decided to go out that weekend to celebrate with a couple of friends where I could tell them the whole story of what happened until that point. It was an interesting experience. As I was telling them, the whole bar started to listen to my story. I've never had free drinks from strangers before. That was the very first and last time. I noticed a couple of friends were really uncomfortable. One was drinking like there was no tomorrow. I asked what was going on. Then, my neighbor's wife said, "I'd like to tell you something, but I promised not to tell." It was the exact situation I dreamed of. My body became cold, and I said, "I think I know what you're talking about." I continued, "She's pregnant, and it's a girl." "How do you know?" she asks. "I had a dream where I dreamed of this very moment," I explained. Everyone was surprised, of course. My friend that's drinking like there was no tomorrow sighs in relief. "At least I don't have to break my word." He told me that he was drinking like that because he wanted to tell me, but didn't know how. From then on, the only thing I knew is that X and Dick moved to his home country, and they were living with his parents. She didn't speak the language, but I guess she learned it by now. She indeed had a baby girl, and I know nothing more about that. I had several hardships over the past few years, but ended up graduating in winter semester of 2016 as one of the best students of that class, and I was invited to be salutatorian, which I accepted. I got a couple of jobs after school, but ended up working in the gaming industry again, where I was just promoted. I'm still waiting on my immigration process that hopefully will be done in the first semester of 2020. My story continues. I licked my wounds and have a bunch of scars, but I'll keep going, keep fighting for the bright future I know I can have. I'm much more mature now. I know who I can trust, and I know that I owe so much to my friends and family for the support they gave me. I hope you can take inspiration on this part of my story. Keep fighting and persevering as I did. My brain tumor story. My name is Brandon, and I'm from Australia. Most of my life as a teen, I was very skinny, the eat anything and not gain weight kind of skinny, and suffered from really extreme headaches to the point where I would get home and close the blinds and lay on the couch kind of headaches. I had them for about 5 years straight, and I had seen maybe 4 different doctors, and none of them helped me, but instead gave me painkillers and sent me home. I was now 18 and weighed 48 kilograms, or roughly 108 pounds, and still having severe headaches, so I went to see the new doctor in town, as it was a small town. We got new doctors sometimes. He had suggested maybe getting a CT scan, which scared the S out of my mom, but I really didn't know what that meant or what to expect. So we fly to the city, which is an 18-hour drive or 1-ish hour flight. We got the CT scan, effing loud machine. When we met with the doctor, he said that I had a growth in my brain, which made my mom start to cry. And I kind of just sat and really didn't say anything. And the doctor started making phone calls to surgeon, which upset my mom even more. Fast forward maybe 2 weeks. It was no longer referred to as a growth, but after another CT, they said the type of tumor was a non-cancerous one, which was amazing news. Probably the best news we had. But it was a pituitary gland brain tumor, which wasn't good. The pituitary gland controls a lot of hormones and a lot of other important things in the body. So I'm getting ready to have surgery, and I'm not really nervous, more kind of excited to get it out, but of course, things could go wrong. The pituitary gland is also attached to the optic nerve, which is connected to my eyes. So it turned out I had lost part of my eyesight over the past few years, but it was so slow, I didn't actually notice. So the old way they would do the surgery is they would crack open the skull and do it that way. But they had a new way of doing the surgery, which is to go through the nasal cavity, up to the skull, drill a hole through the skull, remove the tumor, and then would take a skin graft of some tissue and cartilage from inside the nose and would make a wall to cover up the hole. And because of the new way they do this surgery, they have a higher chance of removing all of the tumor and not having to go back and remove more. There was always a chance because of where mine was that obviously I could receive brain damage or go blind or, worst case, die. When I woke up, I was so effing high on morphine. I was seeing triple everything because my optic nerve had been stretched from the tumor, and I had tubes everywhere, but I could see my parents next to me and some doctors. Anyway, I pass out. A week goes by after coming in and out of my high morphine state, and I get moved to a ward block with my own room, which is like first class compared to the ICU. I sleep and watch TV for another week with my triple vision, which was horrible, but eventually it started to subside. My vision came back, but my peripherals never came back, which was in 2015, and I still haven't gotten it back to this day. But I didn't suffer any brain damage. I did have really bad damage to my pituitary gland, which could be fixed with meds that I still take and probably will for the rest of my life. I'm all good now. I take meds, but I'm healthy. I gained a bunch of weight, so I wasn't very skinny anymore, and I didn't have any more headaches, which was a weird time in my life because I had a lot of anxiety and depression for a few years. But I eventually got to a point where I wasn't so sad, but still had a lot of anxiety every time I got a headache or something didn't feel right. But I'm getting better at dealing with it. This is the first time I ever told anyone about it, but I'm bored, so here it is. I hope you liked it.
I was asked to a threesome, and I declined. I was 16 years old and was a swimming instructor at the local outdoor pool during the summer. My job basically was to teach little kids ages 6 to 10 how to float. It was a job where I had to do very little for getting some good cash, so like any teenager looking to make a quick buck, I jumped on it. I had a clock-in time of 3:45 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. Fairly bad time to be swimming in my opinion because summers in India are brutal. But anyway, in those 2.5 hours, me and another instructor had 2 classes of about 30 kids each. The pool had an adjoining deck where the parents could stand and watch their kids flap around in the water. In the second class, we had 2 kids who were pretty good swimmers, and I always wondered why they were in my class from the start of the summer. To clarify, the local pool place had 2 pools, a small one where kids who were starting out had to practice paddling and floating, and a full-size pool where the kids who were a little older and knew how to swim would practice. I, being a first-time instructor, was allocated the small pool for obvious reasons. Anyways, the kid who knew how to swim would be shifted to the big pool by their parents with the recommendation of instructors from my pool later in the summer. When I talked to my partner/other instructor about these kids, he told me that they were the bigger pool last year, but their moms got them shifted to the pool back this summer. Weird moms, I thought, but shrugged it off. For changing rooms, we instructors had a small outhouse kind of building, which barely had a shower and a loo, but no doors or curtains. The changing rooms also had small ventilators through which if someone wanted to, could see the person showering. Pretty sucky, but it was after all a small pool place. After 2 classes, both the instructors were off the clock and the next set of instructors would come in for the last 2 classes of the day. Every day when I'd be stepping off the pool, I would talk to the kids' parents about the class and how their kids did, how they could improve, etc. I would make it a point to talk to every parent who wanted to have a word before going to the showers, so that they could be on their way and I could take a shower in peace without making anybody wait for me. The mom of those 2 kids, however, were not interested in that. They would make it a point to wait every day for me to finish, come out of the showers, and then talk to me about anything except their kids. They gave their kids smartphones so that they wouldn't interrupt. It started getting weirder by the day, and I made it a point to keep recommending them to shift their kids to the bigger pool just so that they would get off my back. I couldn't just complain to my supervisor because it wasn't anything extreme, just a little weird. The moms were obviously not willing to listen that their kids ready for the big pool and that they were still learning to paddle and they needed my help. One day after my class, while I was showering, I could see these 2 moms snickering outside the outhouse and looking at me. They couldn't see the whole estate because we blocked off the walls of the ventilator, so you couldn't really stand next to the ventilator, but you could still see the face of the person showering. I was thoroughly grossed out and just wanted to go home. I didn't even bother to acknowledge them and just walked towards the parking lot. I was standing by my bike, putting on the helmet, when I felt a tap on the shoulder. And who would it be but one of the moms? Let's call them M1 and M2. M1. Hi sir, how are you today? We wanted to talk to you about how our kids did today. Me. Disgusted look. They did fine. Like I said, they don't need to be in my pool. They could shift to the other one. M2. No, they still need you. Plus it gives us a chance to look at you while you teach them. Me. What? M2. I mean, we could still see how good they are doing in the class. Me. Like I said, they are good swimmers now. They don't need me. Just wanting this weird conversation to be over. M1. Okay. Actually, we were thinking if we could talk to you about something else too. We really need help from you. Me. Look, ma'am, I'm just trying to go home and I'm doing everything I need to for your kids. M1. No, we need you to help us moms. Me. Help you how? M1. We want you to teach us how to swim. We really want to learn and be able to swim with our little angels. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am, I only teach kids. M2. Can't you make an exception for us? We'll make it worth your time. She starts to stroke my arm and both of them take steps towards me, coming uncomfortably close. I realize exactly what she's implying. At this point, the parking lot was pretty empty because all the kids and their parents had left and so had my partner. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am, this isn't something that I'm interested in, and can you please not touch me? M1. Don't be ridiculous. We just wanted to learn swimming and do some other things with you. Me. Stop it, ma'am. Do you realize I'm 16 years old and this is illegal and you both would be charged as pedophiles? M2. Oh, come on. You don't look 16. You are lying. Do you really not want us? You always wait after class and talk to us alone. Me. Ma'am, that's my job. I'm supposed to do that. This is making me uncomfortable. If you both don't leave me alone, I'm going to complain to my supervisor and call the police on you. Both of them started squirming and took some steps back. I took the chance to start my bike and rushed away. As soon as I got home, I called my partner and told him exactly what happened. He told me to calm down and told me that we'll talk to the supervisor tomorrow. We never did talk to the supervisor because apparently after I left, both of the moms canceled their kids' membership and they never returned. I didn't really want to pursue the matter, just forget about it. Years after, the Chad in me still says that I could have had a threesome when I was 16 and I'm an idiot who passed it up. But at that time, I was pretty traumatized and didn't know what to make of the whole situation. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm missing out a few lines from the conversation, but I just don't remember quite a bit of it. This is all I remember. Anyways, thanks for reading if you did, and again, discount any mistakes that I might have made. Let me know what you think. My friends went missing when I was 6. I guess to start off, I should introduce myself. My name is Melissa, I'm 16 years old, and around 10 years ago, 4 of my friends went missing. I remember the day clearly, yet some parts are all fuzzed up. It's strange how the mind works. Anyways, I was 6. My dad, older brother Matthew, and younger brother Liam were driving to a birthday party. It was hosted at this old knockoff showbiz pizza place. We lived in a tiny town in Utah, so this was really the only place for kids to hang out. A cheap place for parents to drop off their demons to occupy them. My brother, who was 15 at the time, worked there as a waiter while my dad worked the day shift. When we were really little, my dad would sometimes let one of the managers babysit us, mostly me. I remember him well. He always wore plaid and flannel and almost was always working on something. There was another manager too, but he was very distant. He disliked kids despite having his own. He never talked much. I'm getting off topic. Anyways, the second we pulled into the semi-crowded lot of the pizza place, I hopped out. I threw the glass doors open and ran into the main show area. There was the big stage with bright multicolored lights showcasing 3 classic animatronic animals. There was confetti on the tiled floor and glitter on the tables. I was very quick to find my friend, the birthday boy. He had russet ginger hair and brown eyes. He was 2 years older than me, turning 9 that day. I don't remember his name as my brain repressed this day so much. Mostly him. We were close, I knew that. I probably just wanted to forget to ease the pain. I remember grabbing him into a hug and talking for a while as the other members of the party filled in. There were 5 of us in total. I remember the others, but not much. Only key features. The oldest, I believe, was the boy with dark brown hair, and he was tall, like really tall. I remember something strange with his eyes. They were cold, yet so warm and welcoming to us. The other boy, I think, was the opposite. He had long, messy, dark hair and was really short. I think his name started with a J, Jeremy or Jamie maybe. I don't even remember if he was a girl or a boy. There was a girl though, I remember her well. She has honey blonde hair and I think green or blue eyes. She was hyper and sweet. I think she called me Melly Bear. I do know she had a puppy, a little yellow lab named Fetch. Strange name, I'm aware. Those were all of them. The 5 of us, great friends. The day was a blur. Talking, eating pizza, playing, watching shows, playing those crappy arcade games, kid stuff. But the shit hit the fan pretty soon. A rabbit costume, I think. It had to be a costume. It moved too fluidly, too human. It scared me. It was yellow with fluffy golden fur and green eyes. It had a purple bow tie and matching buttons. It was terrifying. It said that there was a tradition for birthday parties here, that the Golden Bunny would take the kids to a special birthday room and give them gifts in a private performance. He said he would take us one at a time. The ginger hair boy went first. then the tall one, then the short one, and then her. The honey-haired girl. As he led her out, I swear I could hear him whisper, "Fetch isn't dead, dear. He's with the others. I'll show you him." Minutes passed. After a while, I grew impatient and went to go investigate. I saw the rabbit come out of a room, moving swiftly to the parts and services room near the stage. I walked up to the door, which he had closed, and knocked gently. I heard nothing. Gripping the handle, I twisted it and pushed it inwards, or so I tried. The door was jammed tight. I pushed as hard as my little 6-year-old body could, and finally the door gave way. I caught myself on the slippery tile, the door nearly shutting behind me. Thankfully, there was a bit of light, letting me see a little. The floor was slick with something dark and warm. I didn't realize it right away. I didn't see the huddled mounds. I didn't see the blood on my hands and the blood splattered in the wall. I only saw him. He was lying simply against the wall, hugging his fox plush close to his blood-stained red shirt. I remember crawling over and shaking him, trying to get a response. I remember the next bit fully. I'll write it as I remember. "Hello? Are you awake? Melissa?" "Yes, you idiot. Why are you asleep? Mel, you shouldn't be here." He had reached to gently touch my face, blood dripping from his mouth. I only then saw the red, the wound on his stomach. "You're bleeding. Hold on, I could get help." "No, you can't." "But..." "No, Melissa, I'm a goner." He paused to cough some. He weakly lifted the old fox plush to my shaking hands. "Take care of him, will ya?" "You..." "Shh, it's okay. Find him for me. For us. All right?" He was slipping out of consciousness. "Please, hang on." He went limp. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. I couldn't do anything but get up and run as fast as I could. I locked myself in the restroom for a few hours. I washed the blood from my clothes and hands, though it stained a little. I stumbled back into the room afterwards. I'm not sure why. The light illuminated the room fully. There was blood splattered on the floor. Streaks indicated something being dragged. Signs of a struggle were present. I screamed. The police came soon after, but they couldn't find a thing. No bodies, no weapons, no fingerprints. I cried all day. I didn't answer questions. I clung to my brothers. Before we left, I took his hoodie. I still have it in my closet to this day. I remember seeing his mom before we left. I ran to her and hugged her so tight and sobbed harder than I thought possible. It was strange how I felt better clinging to her rather than my own mother. I told her what happened, about the rabbit leading them away. I questioned my dad about a rabbit suit, but he didn't know a thing. There was no birthday party thrown for kids there. There was no private performance for birthday kids. All of it was a lie. I've been putting it off for years, doing minimal research on who this killer could be, but now I feel as if I should dig deeper. I'll go look for clues and keep you guys updated. Wish me luck. I see a boy whenever somebody dies. I was 5 when I first met him. I could still remember it. We were driving to the grocery store in a big van. My dad at the wheel and my mom arguing with my older brother over an M-rated video game he wanted to buy. The commotion started to make my little sister cry. I sat in the back seat all by myself, trying to ignore it all as I played on my Game Boy, but it was too noisy and hot to focus on it. Finally, I gave up and decided to lie down on the seat, taking a nap before we got to the store. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I was really hot. Sweat was dripping down my scalp and my mouth felt like sandpaper. Sitting up, I rubbed my head and tried to remember where I was, only to realize that the car was parked near the grocery store entrance. My family, no doubt caught up in their arguments, must have forgotten about me. I wasn't alone in the car though. I realized as I noticed there was a strange figure sitting at the passenger seat, looking forward at the car parked in front of us with their hands behind their head. "Who are you?" I asked bluntly, and I could see I'd taken them by surprise. The figure jumped up from their seat and turned their head around to look at me. I could see that it was a boy with pale skin and silver hair that reminded me of the characters in my brother's games. To my surprise, he smiled when he saw me. "Hey there, little guy," he greeted as if he were one of my relatives before he crawled forward into the middle seats. "I didn't think you'd wake up." I backed away as he came closer, which made him laugh as he sat backward in the chair, staring down at me. "Come on, there's no need for that. I swear I won't touch you." Being a 5-year-old, I wasn't equipped to handle a situation like this, and so I resorted to stating the obvious. "This isn't your car," I said. "That's true," he replied as his smile seemed to grow wider. "Don't worry, kid. I won't be here too long. I'm just waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked back, but in reply he just winked at me before lying back down on the seats. It was then that I noticed the smell around him, ashy and stale, like a dying fire. Not wanting to say anything else to the stranger, I moved to the edge of the seat and stared to the store's entrance, waiting for my family to come back. After some time passed, I saw my mom walk out toward the van alone in a hurry. It seemed she had finally noticed I was missing. "Hey," I said to the stranger, "you need to leave, my mom's coming." "Really?" he asked as he shot back up to look out the window. To my surprise, he seemed excited about the news. Upon seeing her walking down the lot, he turned to me with an oddly somber look, giving what he'd been acting like just moments before. "Well, kid," he said, "it's been fun talking to you, but I've got to get to work. Don't hate me too much for this, all right?" I was about to ask what he meant when a loud noise outside caught my attention. I turned back to the window to see that where my mother had been standing, a car was now in her place. A woman who I assume was the driver was standing next to the driver's side, screaming and sobbing as a crowd of people surround her. I was confused about what was happening until I saw 2 legs lying in the parking lot, the rest of the body obscured by the parked car. A trail of blood was leaking out from a wound I couldn't see, and as my eyes followed it, I noticed that at the end of the legs were my mother's shoes. I stood frozen for a few seconds as my brain processed the scene, and as tears started to run down my face, I turned around to face the boy. "What did you do?" I called out in anger, only to freeze when I realized I was now alone in the van. Somehow he had slipped out without me even hearing. Now alone and confused, I had no idea what else to do. So I did what any child would have done, crawled into the middle seats, pulled the door open, and ran to my mother. By the time I had gotten up to her, sizable crowd had already formed, and I could hear the wailing of an ambulance in the distance. I tried to shove my way through the onlookers, and as I did, I noticed the dying fire smell again. Looking to the direction of it, I could see a glimpse of silver hair before it disappeared through the group, and a new burst of energy coursed through my body. I pushed through the crowd with a strength I didn't think I was capable, shouting all the way. As I got to the edge of the crowd, who were now being pushed back by the store's security, I could see the boy walking out towards my mom, who was lying in a heap next to the entrance. "Leave her alone!" I shouted and ran forward before any of the guards could stop me. The boy ignored my pleas as he neared my mother's body. When he got close enough to her, he knelt down by her side and raised his hand out to her. I was just about to reach them when I felt a pair of hands grab my waist and lift me up. "No!" I screeched, kicking and punching at my assailant as they pulled away. I looked over to see that it was my father, who was staring at me with a panicked expression as he marched back toward the crowd. "Let me go!" I protested. "You have to stop him!" But it was too late, I realized as I turned my head back. The boy had his hand resting on my mother's face, and he was staring at me with a look of remorse. In an instant, I stopped all my protesting and began to sob into my dad's shoulder. Later, when we were in the police office, we'd been told that my mother died on the scene. In her hurry to come back for me, she wasn't paying attention to the traffic of the parking lot and didn't notice a car pulling through the next lane. The woman was on her phone and didn't notice my mom until it was too late. I tried to tell them about the boy in the car, who knelt beside my mother as she was lying on the asphalt. However, everyone told me that I was the only one who had tried to run up to her. They even looked through security footage of the parking lot to see if there was anyone else in the van with me before my mother's death, and they saw that there was nobody else inside but me. Eventually, they had a specialist come in and say that the heat of the van, mixed with the trauma of the experience, had caused me to hallucinate the whole thing. Still, though, for the next few days, whenever we ride in that old van, I smell that dying fire scent lingering in the air. I've been paralyzed for 5 years. This morning, I woke up with feeling in my legs again. When I was 17 years old, I was in a horrific car accident that claimed the lives of my father and my little brother Jax. Not only did I lose two of the most important people to me on the same day, but I suffered an irreversible spine injury that left me paralyzed from the waist down. I was a very athletic kid, so suddenly being paralyzed was like having something precious ripped away from me. Track was suddenly no longer an option. My friends were still nice to me, but we eventually all drifted apart as I had completely altered my life around my injury. I had to move to the bottom floor of my 2-story house, and things that I once did mindlessly took planning and a lot of energy to complete. It took about a year to finally get into a steady rhythm of things, and another 2 to accept that being paralyzed is a part of who I am now. There is no cure for being paralyzed. At least that's what I thought. Last night, I was at a bar with a friend of mine named Frankie. She's a loud and rambunctious girl who likes to drink way too much, but I love her to death. It was around midnight when I first spotted the stranger staring at me from a corner booth at the bar. He had a drink in his hand that he was slowly sipping on. He was handsome, in an almost otherworldly sort of way. His porcelain skin seemed to glow in the dank bar light, and his amber eyes were fixated on me. He looked like an angel. He was rather dressed up for a bar in a button-down shirt and black slacks, but his tie was missing and the first few buttons of his shirt were undone. He looked like a businessman that was just having fun. I haven't been on a single date since being in my wheelchair. There are people that honestly don't care about it, but the feeling of being a burden hinders me from going back into the dating scene, so having a gorgeous man openly stare at me was rather unnerving. It took about 10 minutes for Frankie to notice him, and with a sly smile on her face, she subtly found someone to occupy her time, leaving the seat next to me at the table open for someone to claim. It didn't take long for him to take a seat next to me, and as he sat down, I got this feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. He introduced himself as Ray, and we chatted on the weather and what we do for a living. I'm an artist, and he is actually a businessman, as I guessed. It explains the attire. Talking with him was like breathing, simple and easy. He never once asked about why I'm in a wheelchair, which is why I agreed to talk with him longer. As he ordered me more and more drinks, I found myself willingly talking about it for the first time since it happened. The question that followed after my story was one that still strikes me as important. What would you do to be able to walk again? It seemed like a harmless question, one that my friends have asked me before. Of course, the answer is always the same. Anything. I would do anything to be able to feel my legs again, to be able to walk and run and reach the cookies that my mother keeps just out of my reach. His tone was the only thing that was different, the thing that made me uneasy. It was almost teasing, his eyes alight with joy as I answered him. In the following hours, I don't know how, but I knew I made a very grave mistake by answering the way I did. The conversation ended rather abruptly after that, with Frankie falling into the table and spilling our drinks everywhere. I called us an Uber for a way home and prayed that she would be okay on her own. As we waited outside, Ray took my hand in his own and delicately planted a kiss on my knuckles, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I'll be seeing you soon. Those words now haunt me as I stare at myself in the mirror, standing on my legs for the first time in 5 years. The words weren't a request. It was a statement, a promise. He will be seeing me, and I cannot help but wonder if his gift this morning is a threat or an order. What will I do to be able to walk again? I woke up this morning with the deadly-looking dagger on my nightstand, and symbols that I've never seen before were carved into the hilt, overlapping one another. There were triangles and circles and swirling patterns that resembles vines. That wasn't the only thing different. I could feel my legs. It wasn't just a gradual warm-up to walking. I could stand and jump and run. I'm not sure what I got myself into, but something tells me Ray is not just a normal person. Ever since waking up, I've periodically checked on the dagger, but it hasn't moved from the position on my nightstand. The symbols seem to glow as the night progresses, and I worry what will happen when I see Ray again. How religion took 16 years from my life. It feels weird to do this, but I wanted to tell my story to people who might understand. I'm not professionally diagnosed, but I definitely have deep emotional and mental problems. Please don't tell me to seek out professional help. I want to have therapy so bad. I know that I need help, but for now, it's not possible. Because if I would ask my parents, they would tell me I should pray to God and He would fix the phase I have. But I assure you, as soon as I get the opportunity to seek out professional help without my parents knowing I'm going to. As long as that is possible, I'm trying to figure out what is going on with me on my own. I did so much research during quarantine because I started to question my sense of self, especially my identity, and ended up having an internal crisis. I thought my issues weren't that deep because I never was physically abused and technically everything in my life was fine. I had clothes, food, and an overall loving family on the surface. And I played it down because I thought someone like me can't call their experiences trauma because I was never hit nor bullied. Generally, people like me because I was a massive people pleaser and still do it, but it's gotten better. Or at least, they were nice to me. My parents supported me, helped me out when I needed money for something, and now there are two parts of me fighting. The one part that knows exactly how hecked up I really am, and the other part that tells me I'm exaggerating, that I should stop overthinking and stop being ungrateful. I'm torn, and I hope to find at least one person who kind of understands me. I feel like no one could ever get me, because my trauma doesn't feel validated. Even though I found out that the part of the brain that is responsible for physical pain is also responsible for emotional pain. It still feels like I don't deserve to be heard, because on the surface, everything was perfectly fine, and even though I talked to friends about it and they really helped me, they still told me to be grateful that I was well-liked and no one directly hurt me. But I can't. I can't look at the positive aspects and live normally. It affects my life. It affects the person I am. It shaped me. I can't concentrate, and it got worse and worse with time. I have emotional outbursts that I learned to hide. I'm constantly on guard and don't feel safe in my house because I constantly think my parents could find out something that I'm hiding from them. I can never relax no matter where I am, except when I'm at my boyfriend's house and I know no one is going to be at home for a longer period of time. I feel like I'm not worth it. I feel ugly on the inside and outside, and I hate myself for coping by overeating. I'm not obese nor anything near it, but if I continue to eat how I eat without going to the gym, it could happen. I feel like I don't have to be the main mother figure to my sisters because my mom is so emotionally detached that I don't want them to think that what she does is real love. But the worst thing is how distant I feel from my emotions and myself. Does a myself even exist? Can I ever be it? I feel numbed out and drained, even though I do nothing all day but distract myself as good as I can. I feel like I never achieved anything and that I never will. Everything is so overwhelming and so hard to do, even the littlest homework or task. That's why I have a pile of work in my emails, and in the back of my mind that stresses me the hell out. But I just can't get myself to do it unless it has a deadline. And even then, I tend to it last minute. I feel weak, stupid, and misunderstood, and I think to myself, if that continues, all my good marks are going to drop, and then my parents are going to be a problem even on the surface. I'm doing my A-levels, class of 2021, in Germany. I was born here. Right now, and I just feel like I can't do it, and it is required from me that I get a prestigious degree, even though I would rather pursue a singing career. That was the longest introduction I ever wrote, but it needed to be at least written down somewhere. So what is the big deal? What am I complaining about? I'll try to create a chronological order and to remember everything crucial, but I yesterday realized that I'm missing blocks of time in my memories, even from recent times. It all started before I was born. My parents found each other through friends and got together. My mom lived in Kazakhstan before moving to Germany. I still don't exactly know why. And my father lived in Siberia before moving to Germany. His and my uncle's parents wanted to prevent them from having to fight in a war zone. And so they happened to live in the same city and they met. They got together and married. Then their neighbors invited them to go with them to a Russian-German evangelical church, and they ended up being members. Then I was born and everything was perfect. I was in church every Sunday from the moment my mother could leave the hospital. I never knew anything different. And as soon as I was able to be separated from my mother for 2 to 3 hours, I was with other children my age while the adults were attending the big service. And then the indoctrination started. I don't remember much from my time in church, or the cult as I call it now, from the time before I was 12. I only remember my time in school, which is very odd to me, but what do I know? I just remember being a people pleaser from the start and everything they taught us, but there aren't many clear memories. I was good at being a people pleaser. Now it's easy for me to approach people and connect on a surface level, but at what price? It's scary to me that my memories are so blurry. I don't even know who I was friends with or if I even had friends before the age of 10. I just remember that I wanted to be perfect in God's eyes. I wanted to be the perfect example of a girl who loves Jesus with all her heart. I wanted people in church to look at me and think I will make it far in my faith. And I achieved that, I think. But now I hate my past self for caring so much. So what were we taught there? God created the world, Jesus died for my sins and resurrected after 3 days. The Bible is the only truth and the only way I must live. Everything else is the devil's work. And even though they didn't say it in particular, but that our church is the only one to teach the real truth, and that every other church doesn't have God in it and immediately leads to hell and damnation. We were taught that the secular world was highly dangerous, and as soon as we were not following one of God's, the church's, rules, we were open for demons to attack us. And to make it short, you could sin by thinking something. So we were taught to somehow control our thoughts, but give full control to God over every little aspect in our lives, because everything is predestined and we don't have control about anything anyways. But we're still responsible for our actions somehow, and we still have a free will granted from God. While writing this, I really understand how contradicting this is, and it was a core belief of mine. When an adult who looked after you as a toddler tells you this, and there are 500 people who all believed it wholeheartedly, you try to justify it until you really can't anymore. And then everything shatters. Losing faith is something that was so deeply intertwined with your whole existence. It's like part of you just died. Even though you know how ridiculous it was believing in it, and you still feel stupid for not realizing it earlier. So in a nutshell, everything bad you do is because you're not saved. Because for someone who is really saved, it's physically impossible to sin no matter how, and automatically fully your fault. But when you achieve something, it's because God did it. You're never capable of doing or achieving something on your own. You're even unable to think the right, good way. So you're basically nothing and unimportant. But when you come to God, He gives you a purpose He specifically chose for you. You matter to Him. You're worthy of His love. And even though we were taught He is forgiving to everyone and almost everything, if you only follow Him everywhere He leads you. Another bizarre contradiction they teach little children: you're nothing, but with God, you're worthy. It makes me unbelievably mad that there are gradually more and more children who grow up believing this, who are taught that demons, the devil, and hell are around every corner to take them and torture them for eternity if they slip up one tiny bit. That's why I cried myself to sleep for years, begging God to forgive me for saying shit one time, or thinking in my head that I wanted to kiss a boy, not speaking of being attracted to a girl, because of course anything than straight marriage within my church is wrong. Yes, I was expected to have a boyfriend within church, and if he was in the world, I had to convince him to go to church, and he has to love God. We weren't allowed to date before 17, and of course, no premarital sex, but they took it further to prevent it at all costs. You weren't allowed to be alone in a room with your significant other before marriage, so nothing could possibly happen. Holding hands and short hugs were allowed when engaged. So if you grew up there, find a boyfriend and get engaged as fast as possible, because if you fall in love, it must be in God's plan. Because you want to F and then marry as fast as possible, you have to be together at least a year and then be engaged for at least half a year to have your first kiss ever, if you weren't sinful, in front of everybody, and when the pastor says you may kiss the bride. We were taught that God wants us to be pure and learn to value our partner's personality. They told us girls that if we had a sexual relationship before marriage, you would never know if he really loves you or just wants your body. And that every guy outside church would never love us for our personalities. Another contradiction. These young adults rush into marriage not because they think, wow, I really value my partner as a person. No, they're sex-driven teenagers lying to themselves, which is absolutely not their fault, of course. No one is appreciating anything, and if they are, they're very lucky, because there were maybe 15 people in your age range that you could end up with. Girls were also taught to save themselves because we are like chewing gum, and if you're all chewed up, your godly future husband wouldn't want you, would he? We were told we were pure glasses of water, and if we sleep around before marriage, or even with only one person, every time dirt would fall into our pure water, and no one wants to drink dirty water. But the one thing that stuck with me that my mother, and later on, more older woman, told me was every time you sleep with a man, he takes part of your soul with him. That's why there should be only one guy from the start, so that you don't end up losing your soul. The thought of that terrified me to the core, and I believed it. Now I know it's bullshit, but it was in my head constantly for 5 or 6 years. We were told to cover up so guys don't want sin with their eyes and thoughts. Knee-length skirts and shorts were allowed, and I always hated how they looked on me. And you had to cover your belly and your shoulders at all cost. Cleavage was obviously not allowed, and so weren't tight clothes, only skinny jeans, not leggings, especially when you had a little bit more chest. And if you dared to show a tiny bit of skin, no matter how hot summer was, even if it was accidental, you'd get in trouble. I was in that godforsaken building almost every day, except for Wednesdays where we would meet up with our local little group of girls. There was a leader a few years older than us, and I'm glad mine wasn't as controlling as others and didn't force me too much to work in different groups in church and discuss what our beloved, I could vomit remembering him and his sleazy and narcissistic behavior, pastor taught us on Sunday. I was involved in worship, and my love for singing kind of saved me because that's the only thing I really did because I myself wanted it. I danced, which was okay. It was workout for me and not dancing for God when I think about it. I looked after toddlers once a month during service with other women. I was in the theater group, and when there was an event for teenagers, I was responsible for leading a group of other teenagers to organize it, so everything was done and standing where it belongs. I liked organizing, so I was lucky they just positioned me there, but it was still hella stressful. And I played the piano, which I didn't really enjoy. So there were the basics. I was heavily involved. With 12, you move from being with children to the big service, and you're finally old enough to be part of all the cool things the teenagers did. But then you're also constantly stressed out, which worsened every year because obviously school got harder, but also the church demanded more and more, and suddenly you were thrown into highly responsible tasks, which drained you. When I was 14, I started constantly having headaches. I started drinking coffee because I was exhausted from not being able to sleep, being stressed out and constantly worried that someone would find out my secrets. And now I need a very strong one for it to work. Because in school, I was someone else. I had a different name in my school, my real name. In church, the pastor required my parents to introduce me with a very faraway nickname from my real name because it sounded like a name in the Bible that an evil person had, and if I'd be called that, it would curse me. I did and said what I wanted. It increased gradually because I still tried to be myself, which you could be in church. No. In school, but obviously couldn't do that because no one can. I thought I was being myself in school, and maybe that was myself when I was 14, but I still was the most severe case of a people pleaser. And I always ended up in dependent, toxic friendships because I could never say anything against them. I had no one else who was close to me, so that also hurt me even though I didn't notice at the time. People abused my kindness because in church they told us we had to be nice, and I could do that at least. So I held on to being nice to everyone, helping everyone, and inviting people to come to church who were remotely close to me, which still embarrasses me the most, but you get in trouble when you're not inviting people. I'm so glad I was in a very accepting class. No one was ever really bullied, just mocked for a few things maybe, which I was for being in that church. And they told me early on, it's a cult. You believe in crazy shit. Stop going there. But we were taught that people who were afraid of the truth always say that. School was kind of a safe place for me, even if I had toxic friendships and got hurt a few times, because we live about 25 kilometers away from church, the cult, and nobody I knew from there could see me. And even though we were taught that God could see everything and is always reading our thoughts, I didn't feel very watched. I was scared shitless when I wore something in school we weren't allowed to wear in church, and I thought I saw someone I knew, so I felt better in school than at home. And that's why my definition of home is something entirely different than that of people who grew up in an emotionally safe home. So what was living in my home like? I'm the first daughter of 3, and therefore my father's precious firstborn. I learned really fast that just keeping quiet, smiling, and doing what I'm told is the best way to avoid any more stressful situations. I hated every form of confrontation, and I still do. When I was young as 3, my father threatened to hit me with a belt, and did it a few times, but I stopped misbehaving or questioning, so no one yelled at me anymore, and no one told me to stand in a corner without looking. So I just learned to not show my emotions at all at home, because emotions cause trouble and distress. They also told us that. God and our own intellect, which is controlled by God, must lead us. Emotions come out because of the devil. My father was in control of everything, and to this day, he is still extremely sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, etc. You name it. And he still thinks I have exactly the same opinions as him. He is very critical of my boyfriend, but because he puts on a facade in front of my father as I do, my father likes him. My parents, more my father, still don't want me to have anything premarital, even though they are less strict than before. So yeah, I can't ask for birth control because then they would not let me see my boyfriend. As I said, my father is very controlling and has a very high opinion of himself. Because he is providing for our family, he doesn't have to do anything regarding the house. This is on the women and the 4 girls in the house, because that's what God made us for. Popping out babies, cleaning, and cooking. But I still have to get a degree and a high-paying job. And then I ask myself, what do you want from me? What? In church, we learn that you have to find a job that gives you enough time to be as active as possible in church, while giving birth to as many children as possible and managing your whole household completely alone. Because your husband is by God's law above you and there to lead you. How remarkably generous of you to lead me, because I can't decide on anything ever due to always thinking I don't have control anyways. That's why I need to plan everything obsessively and always know and control what's going on. I idolized my father until the realization that we don't have any emotional bond slowly reached me until it hit me hard. I had to organize my phone a certain way and delete messages so in case he would want to go through it, he wouldn't find anything. He wanted me to be his perfect show daughter who has good marks and serves God with all of her existence, and he really did that. In front of him, I am what he wants me to be. I don't know what my mother wants. She just does what my father tells her and silently agrees to what he has to say. Maybe I learned to behave in that way because she did. I'm honestly sorry for her because she never had a chance to study anything that could make her independent because of moving to Germany at 17 or 18 and not being able to speak the language very well. I could cry because no matter how brutal this sounds, her life is over in a way. She is what I never want to be. Whenever they told us how our future will look like, I had a kind of panic that I never felt before. At the time, I suppressed that, but when I think back, my heart rate goes up and I feel like I need to run as fast as I can. And that's why I hate to be dependent on someone. But weirdly, I still end up in situations where I'm highly dependent. Another thing that I can maybe explain now is my reaction to my grandfather's death. He was more of a father to me than my own, and his wife's home, which I also deeply love, felt safe. When I was 11 years old, my grandmother, my grandfather's wife, passed away because of cancer. And I was never allowed to see her while she was sick, nor to attend the funeral. And in that time, I already saw my grandpa rarely. When my parents told me my grandma passed away, I cried one time. I know that I was sad, but I somehow can't recall my immediate emotions from that day. And I thought I'm glad that I still have my grandpa. But he passed away 3 months later, and I wasn't able to see him during those months. When my father emotionlessly told us that his father also passed away, I felt nothing. I didn't cry, no reaction at all, and then I didn't think about it for years. But when I was 14, all of a sudden, all of the emotions I should have felt when I was 11 crushed me harder than ever. It was like reliving the day I was told he was gone forever for almost a year, and I was so confused. Why now? Why didn't I feel anything back then? Because my brain was already way too stressed for an 11-year-old and just didn't process properly. Then 3 years later, something triggered my memories and the horrors began. When I was 16, it hit me again because I found out he committed suicide through my cousin. Back to the cult. So am I still there? No. My parents realized how manipulative literally everything about it was, and without telling anyone there, childhood friends I grew up with included, we went there one last time, and on Sunday, the 23rd of September, 2018, we drove away and never came back. And many others left too. We still meet every Sunday, and I still sing there because I don't want to confront my parents. I really don't want to be there because every time we're there, I'm not really there. I'm just a shell that moves around. During the preaching, which a few men do in turns, I'm always completely zoned out and can only concentrate for a bit if I really try. I don't know what that is or that means, but I absolutely hate it because I can't control it. And sometimes I'm just sad for no reason. I still can't sleep and still get a massive headache and can't stand up properly without strong coffee. I still eat too much stuff. I really shouldn't. And I feel bad for every little bit I eat, but I can't stop. And it also affects all of my relationships, especially with my boyfriend. He sometimes doesn't understand, but he still comforts me and is patient, which I'm really grateful for. And something that comes to mind only now is that my father used to completely lose it when I had a bad mark. I was afraid to come home and always started crying before even telling him. And then he would shout even more, beat the table with his fist and tell me to stop crying. Now I can control if I'm going to cry or not when something upsets me, and if I want to show my emotions or not. Being a very good liar was essential, and it still is. When my father is mad at me because I don't do the dishes, he still gets very impulsive and shames me because if he works and gives me food and clothing, it's just disrespectful to leave the dishes for too long. And when he stands beside me and doesn't stop while I do the dishes, I just nod my head and say yes. It's the only way to avoid more pain at all cost. There are these moments, but also the ones where he tries to talk to me and ask how I am, and then he tells me how he loves me, his firstborn princess. He tells me that I'm the best daughter someone could have, and that he's so proud of me. And I just smile at him and say thank you. But on the inside, I think, if you really knew who I really am and what I did that you don't have, you wouldn't talk to me anymore. He is proud of the daughter he created for himself that I still am in front of him. And also my mother tries to get closer to me after 16 years of distance and letting the church raise us. And the only thing I would tell her if I was honest for a few seconds in the midst of all the lies I protect myself with, I'm sorry, but it's too late. I don't have any emotional connection to my parents, and I never had. The first 16 years of my life were partly wasted. I felt like someone took my childhood from me. Even my memories are blurry. And I know it's technically not my parents' fault, but I want to blame them so badly. And it makes me so mad that I was born because of the church, because they convinced my father to have children. I was cursed before I even existed. And still, I can recall a few beautiful memories of things I did with my friends there. The sleepovers, summer camp, singing together, playing hide and seek in the big building. All of us connected through our fear of the dangerous outside world and hell. There is no moment in my life where I wasn't afraid that some adult could dream or feel. They taught us that God could reveal things about people to you when you have a strong connection to the Holy Spirit, that I was a dirty sinner that acted differently in school. And it was so frightening because when it's out that you messed up, you can't attend certain rituals like the Holy Communion, and that's when people know. They see that you're not taking part in it, and the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, premarital sex. When a couple did it and someone found out, it made sure by the authorities that in a week, everyone knows. And I wanted to avoid people thinking that at all costs, so I was very aware and on guard at all the time. I made sure I had a different app also open while watching Vampire Diaries on my phone, because there you could switch faster so my mother or father, who still just burst into my room whenever they want to, would never know I would watch something the devil created. My parents and everyone in the church who was responsible for me always tried to shelter me and get anything with a bad influence away from me. But I still watched what I wasn't allowed to. The internet and myself raised me when my beliefs started to break away. People like Jenna Marble taught me things parents should teach their kids. I educated myself on so much stuff I missed out on and started to build my own opinions and morals from 14 to 16. Basic knowledge like it's okay to not believe what your parents believe was so new to me. And now I just want to move out and study something so I'm always safe. I can't wait for the day where I'm finally going to be financially independent and don't have to rely on my father. Wow, it feels so good to put that all in words. When you watch until now, you must be really, really bored. But thank you. I appreciate your attention greatly. 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 Let's go back to late August 2017 when I, after not going on a date or actually even talking to a man for 9 months, decided to download Tinder and Bumble. Turns out it's all the same people on both apps. Same dis, different pics, am I right? I met a guy named Mike. We talked and drank beer at the since closed Green Lake Bar and Grill for 3 lovely hours, and afterward I walked him to his car. His car, because I suck at parallel parking, and in an effort to avoid having the patrons at my destination witness the embarrassing attempts and failures of properly operating a vehicle, I have been deemed fit to drive for over a decade. I find an empty street, ditch the car, and walk half a mile or more every time. Gotta get my steps. Do people still count those? I don't. Whatever. Anyway, we get to his car and it's a wreck, full of overflowing cardboard boxes and garbage in the back seat. The exterior paint is peeling and there are empty cigarette boxes strewn about, tobacco ash on every surface, spilling like slow lava flows from every crevice. Crooked butts peek out from under the seats like the stale McDonald's french fries of my grandmother's minivan throughout my childhood. I am half convinced that Mike has lived full time in this car at one point recently. Total dirtbag aesthetic. So naturally, I was swooning. We said goodbye and hugged briefly, politely. He didn't try to kiss me. A dirtbag, possibly homeless dude who isn't even into me. Hot damn. Yes, please. I was fantasizing about all kinds of dirty things during the tokenesque journey back to my car. It dawned on me very quickly that my chances of having sex in the near future had increased from 0% to whether or not Mike's car could survive the drive to my place if we were ever decide to hang out again. I looked up local mechanics and tow trucks just in case. I made a special trip to Safeway the following day to purchase condoms. I found a shopping basket and headed toward the aisle where I assumed condoms were kept. My anxiety reminded me that I am not mentally or socially equipped to make a purchase of just condoms, even if I paid for it through self-checkout during the mid-afternoon lull I was strategically counting on. Discretion, modesty, and decades of sexual shame directed at women prompted me to first wander through the produce section. I actually needed bananas and grabbed a few cucumbers, carrots, and then tossed in a package of pre-made guacamole, a box of brown sugar Pop-Tarts, and a few things to reduce the phallic-shaped objects piling up in my basket to further conceal the condoms. Dating is hard. That's what she said. I grabbed a box of a dozen condoms feeling optimistic and proceeded to argue silently as to not draw attention with this register that scanned items were already placed in the bagging area. Why is this still a thing? Fix this. I got home and unpacked the reusable shopping bag only to realize the condoms were not in the bag. I looked around the kitchen and the space near my door where I dropped stuff and piled up shoes. Nothing. I checked the car next because what I lack in parking skills, I make up for in taking turns too fast when driving alone. Like I don't know if I want to live or die and I need those little moments I'm not sure if the tires are going to stay on the ground. I feel a little lift or a slide and know, because I'm close to death, that I'm alive and like it. But the condoms were nowhere to be found. The receipt confirmed I paid for them. I was frustrated because I spent like $40 just to buy condoms and I didn't even get them home. If nothing else, I am a bee on a budget and I can't afford to go through that ordeal again. Reason told me to call the store. Reason is an a-hole. The call went like this. Thanks for calling Safeway. This is Timmy, or some other teenage-specific names adults never have. How could I help you? Yeah, hi, I just went through self-checkout and got home, and one of the items I purchased didn't make it home with me. Is there anything I could do? Oh, sure, I could check to see if you left it over there, he said, with the professional level of enthusiastic charm that is required for bullshit customer service calls. We usually keep stuff on the side when people forget things. What's the item? This is the part of the sitcom where Jack Morris pauses life at Bayside High School and speaks directly to the audience, telling them how I am about to heck everything up. Jim Halpert is making that face at the camera. Classic horror movie music starts playing at an ominously increasing volume that everyone but me and the fisherman from Jaws can hear. Boisterous women in movie theater audience are yelling, "Hang up the phone, you dumb bee!" This is real life, and I can't hear them. I imagine if I could, their cries would haunt me like Clarice and the Screaming Lambs. Plus, I am masochistic, or a moron, possibly both. Yeah, I say in my almost Bill Lumbergh tone. It was condoms? The pitch of my voice rose as I spoke the last word like a question, like I wasn't sure if I wanted to say it. I didn't. Timmy tried to put the call on hold before he started giggling. He was not successful. I am on hold. This is the part of the sitcom where Zach Morris pauses Bayside High. Jim and the shark from Jaws have teamed up and are both making that face through the office blinds. A woman screams, clapping between words, "Hang up the phone!" SpongeBob SquarePants comes to my defense, mocking their pleas for sanity, leaning forward, hands on their hips, eyes bulging. "Hang up the phone!" I don't. Timmy returned the call after a long enough pause to tell every employee in the store that some girl is on the phone because she lost her condoms and doesn't have the self-respect/budget to just eat the $12 and move on with her life, and she is actually calling the store. He is pleased to finally have a funny story to tell the girl in his math class he has a crush on her for years. "Hi, I don't see any..." He hesitates like he's searching for the word on Ask Jeeves in 1998. The page eventually loads and he continues. "Condoms over there, but you could bring your receipt to the customer service desk and get another box." I regain control of my life. "Yeah, that's not gonna happen, thanks." I hung up. "Finally!" screams the frustrated, fictitious audience of my life. I then, like any sane and reasonable adult who isn't still jaded about Bezos' tax evasion, ordered a box of 36 condoms from Amazon for about the same price as the dozen at Safeway to be delivered, discreetly packaged to my door/leasing office within 1 to 2 business days. And I mean, I am still bitter about Bezos, but the annual Prime account fee already went through for the year, so to cancel now would be like giving him the money, so I might as well use it and cancel my membership before the next billing cycle. I tell myself for the 4th year in the row. I laid in bed cursing my alarm the following morning when I remembered my pre-made splurgy guacamole and jumped up to make avocado toast before my early morning class. Insert millennial joke here. Everyone laughs except the millennials rolling their eyes and drowning in student loan debt. I took the carton of eggs, bottle of Tapatio, and guacamole out of the fridge. There, on the middle shelf, hidden under the guacamole, sat a silver box containing a dozen Trojan Ultra Thins. I fought the urge to walk away from the kitchen and meet my stupid fate in the middle of the busy street. Police investigating my death would note the open refrigerator door and its unlikely contents, nodding in unison that this was the cause of my untimely but expected and understandable death. And honestly, this is the kind of thing that has happened before. Enough times that I should have checked the refrigerator before I checked the floor of my car. But again, I am a moron. Clearly in optimistic denial about the kind of person I really am. I spent the next 30 minutes scouring the internet trying to figure out if condoms are still effective after being refrigerated for 24 hours, and realized that I am the only person, out of like 8 billion of us, y'all, that has needed to know this information. And I still don't. There was a customer service phone number on the back of the box, but I heard the lamb screaming and threw the condoms away. I got slapped by my parents and they took away everything from me. So my parents caught me at my boyfriend's yesterday and they went ape shit crazy. Now, before I tell this story, keep in mind, I'm 21. Now on to the story. So before anybody asks, yes, I did live with my parents, even though I'm 21. I wanted to save up enough money for me to be able to move out of the house and be able to live in a nice place. I was almost done paying off my car, which they took away now, so it was all pointless. So I was close to moving out. My relationship with my parents has always been rocky. We pretty much don't agree on anything because they are very, and I mean very, old school. They are also strict when it comes to me going out. They're strict to the point where I wasn't allowed to go out past 10 p.m. If I did, then I would get yelled at and they would take away the truck that I was working so hard to pay off. Again, keep in mind, I'm 21. Long story short, they're super strict and very old-fashioned, so I didn't like that, which is why I was planning on moving out soon after I was done paying my car, which was in 4 months. Well, yesterday, I skipped school. I know, super bad of me, to go to my boyfriend's so that he could help me look for a place. I had told my mom that I was in school because I didn't want her to know that I was actually looking at places and trying to figure out a way for me to move out sooner. So me and my boyfriend are sitting down in my truck when all of a sudden my dad opens my car door and slaps me across the face. Me and my boyfriend were so shocked to see my dad that we just stood there, which pissed my dad off more, and so he proceeded to slap me again and started to tell my boyfriend off. I couldn't figure out how the hell they knew I was at my boyfriend's till my mom told me that she was tracking my phone. Keep in mind, I'm 21. So I'm over here getting slapped across the face in shock, and my boyfriend is shocked as well. So we are just standing there while my parents are yelling at us. I finally woke up from my shock after a while, so I yelled at them to stop yelling like wild animals and to take me home. They did just that after they calmed down, but the walk to my parents' car was the most embarrassing thing ever because I felt like a 14-year-old getting picked up by her parents after she tried to sneak out. Again, keep in mind, I'm 21. I also felt even more embarrassed because pretty much all of his family witnesses me getting slapped by my parents. I just couldn't believe my parents had actually done that shit. Honestly, please someone answer me and tell me if this is normal. So we got home and they proceeded to tell me off and go off on me. And I just kept packing up my stuff because I just can't stay in this place after that shit happened. I mean, come on, I got slapped in public by my parents. To make matters worse though, they took away the truck that they sold to me. The truck that I worked hard for just because I want to move out and live my life on my own after what happened. Note, before any of you ask, I can't call the cops on my parents for taking away the truck because my dumbass trusted them when they told me that they would put the car under my name as soon as I was done paying it. In the meantime, the car is under their name, which is why I can't really take legal matters until I show proof that I paid for the truck, which I'm sure will not do much help. Or will it? I'm asking any lawyers out there who are reading this. So now I'm stuck in a situation where I want to move out, but I'm not sure if I should because my parents pretty much kept all of my money and I don't have a car to take me places anymore. Moral of the story is truly be careful of those who you trust because even your own family will sometimes do you dirty. Also make sure that your crazy parents aren't tracking you. Another thing I forgot to mention is that they took away my social security number and my green card, all because I didn't pay for them and I'm ungrateful. B, I was 8 when I got my green card. How the heck am I supposed to pay you? Tinder date turns into clingy and aggressive guy. Okay, true story. I had been dating a guy for several years, and after a number of tense and tough conversations regarding some issues we considered irreconcilable, we broke up. I was single for about 7 months, whole and healed. I understood why we broke up and believed that because of our mutual refusal to bend to the other person, it was for the best. I go on Tinder. I'm a busy gal, and I wanted some food and some wine and an orgasm or two. I made that pretty clear in messaging with several guys, and then the humor and personality of one guy made me agree to the date. It was fun, he had a great personality, and the conversation flowed relatively easy. I went back to his place and we hung out for a while longer, and I ended up going home. Only dinner and wine that night. Then we agreed to meet up again, and I'm thinking about sex. I make that pretty clear. Not in a I'm gonna use you for sex way, but in a I'm on this app because I'm horny and I prefer a real penis to what I've been using for 7 months way. Still, no sex. And the second date, it got a little deeper. Not like, tell me about your familial drama and deepest fears, just who do you want to be? What do you want to do in life? I realize we are pretty far off on the spectrum of our goals, and I don't think you have to line up on goals, but at least drive or ambition. I'm thinking, he's nice, but I don't think I want this to go anywhere. So I tell him that. He says it's fine. He knows what Tinder is for, and he gets it. He thanks me for my honesty, y'all. Fast forward a week or so of texting, schedules not lining up, still no sex. I'm talking to a few other guys on Tinder, and then my ex, after 7 months of running into each other for work-related stuff. We don't work together, but people we work with each of us. In the occasional text, he asked if I need any help moving. A mutual friend mentioned I'd ask for their help. He figured he would offer. Anyway, the ex can't make the move in a day, but comes the day after to help me mount my TV, set up my bed frame, and install a cat door. He was a little weird when he got there, but it was fine. And then, randomly, in the middle of us mounting the TV, he tells me that he's done a lot of thinking. He's talked to his closest friends and his dad about it. He's not big on asking for help, so that's quite the step. And he wants to know if I'm still single. He wants to take me on a date because he realized that some of the issues we broke up over either weren't issues anymore or weren't worth it if it meant he didn't get to have me in his life. Straight out of a damn rom-com this moment was. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm thinking, how is this real? People don't actually do this. You don't break up for 7 months and then get back together. I tell him I've been going on dates and there's a guy who I've been going out with specifically. It's nothing serious, but I don't feel good about just dropping him, and I don't feel good about just jumping back into a relationship we quit for good reasons. So I sent him on his way, after the rest of the installs were done, and I told him I'd think it over. I tell the Tinder guy as soon as we talk next. I'm not in the business of playing with hearts, and I don't want to feel like I'm cheating on someone, even though I'm technically dating no one. He says it's cool, he gets it. Then we do have sex. It's awful. He takes a medication that makes his parts not work all the way, and he was very porny about the whole encounter. In the let's trade positions every 2.5 seconds, and I'm gonna slap your ass hard without mentioning it, and choke you a little without mentioning it before. I faked an orgasm so it would be over, and then he said he couldn't get off without watching porn anyways. Okay, what a fun day. Tinder for the win. Several weeks go by, no sex, a few dates with each guy, lots of tough and intentional conversations with the ex. We come to an agreement. We decide a trial run of dating without sex for about a month and see if it could work. I tell Tinder guy, it's over, I'm going with the ex. He absolutely loses it. Sends me 20 texts in about as many seconds. Calls me several times and ends up telling me I'm not as strong as I think I am if I'm going back to him, as if he was an abusive asshole I fled from. Tells me I'm not even that attractive, that I'm weak-minded and pathetic. Continues texting me mean things, leaves me a very mean voicemail. Luckily, I had just moved and he only had my phone number. Probably stalked me on social media, but didn't have my old or new address. I ended up telling him that it had nothing to do with him, that I was sorry and it wasn't my intention, that we weren't even dating and there was someone out there for him, that we were better as familiar strangers. He really didn't like that and ended up telling me that he loved me and that I was the closest thing to it he'd ever met and that he would never move on. I've now been back with my ex for 8 months and we're doing great. Tinder guy has completely left me alone since the week he confessed his undying love to me, and I've moved on. I'll never date online again. I'll never recommend dating online to anyone. What a wild ride. I wish I made up that story because it caused more than a few tears and several scary nights as I lived alone at a time and I didn't know how crazy Tender Guy really was. Maybe he'll kill my firstborn one day as retribution? Who knows? A date I will never forget. Honestly, I've never been a very open person. I've always been that super friendly and happy girl that seems like she has the perfect life, but no one really knows that deep. I think the only person who knows my entire story is my boyfriend, who is so great to me, and of course my little brother, who shared a lot of these experiences with me. There's a lot of things I have never had the courage to tell anyone, so here I am making my best effort. My parents got divorced when I was 5 years old and my younger brother was 2. This was really the beginning of everything falling apart for me. I know in this generation it's pretty common, but it was hard for a little girl who didn't understand why she had to go to mommy's one week and daddy's the next. I used to cry under my desk at recess and pray every night that they would get back together. My mom and I have never had a good relationship because of everything that has happened. She used to send me to school and daycare in shorts, no jacket, and sandals in the winter, not wanting my good clothes to go to my dad's. Keep in mind, I live in Canada. This is just one of the many things that led to the huge custody battle my mom started. My dad won and they settled on 50-50 custody, but my mom blamed a lot of it on me because I would email my dad telling him how much I missed him, and my mom took this as me taking his side. Of course, being so innocent, I always stuck up for her and thought everything was normal. My mom got remarried when I was 7. Her new husband was far from perfect. He supported us tangibly, but never emotionally. No matter how hard I tried, he was never proud of anything I did, and as a little girl, all I wanted was acceptance. He was also very aggressive, and we were terrified of him. My dad also had a girlfriend. She straight up neglected us. She had a child of her own who she barely had a relationship with. My dad worked night shifts as a refrigeration mechanic in order to support us, and she would lock herself in her room, refusing to talk to us when he was gone. I was around 7 or 8 years old when I started cooking dinner for my little brother and myself. I never told my dad because, again, I thought this was a normal thing. My dad was always telling me how he wishes my mom never gave up on him, and so he never gave up on his girlfriend, who he desperately believed could change for the better. Fast forward to 7th grade. I was 13 years old when my grandpa left my grandma and never told us. They had been married for about 30 years and he cheated on her. He moved out, never telling my brother and I, leaving us to think he was gone on a work trip and never came back. This was devastating, especially for me, because he was my best friend. My grandma became extremely depressed, having been with my grandpa since she was 16. We had to move in with her to help her take care of things, seeing as she had no idea how to do much. A few months later, my dad slipped and broke his ankle and then went to work and broke both arms. It was a year worth of surgeries and officially parenting my brother because my father physically couldn't. He had to quit his job because the nurse ended up being his ex-girlfriend who hated him, and there ended up being a malpractice which he didn't bother doing anything about. Being home all the time literally made him go insane. He developed so many mental health issues and ended up breaking up with his girlfriend. She was livid. She used to break into our house and we'd wake up to her doing dishes and stealing my clothes. No joke. One time we woke up to her in our shower, and when we tried to leave, she jumped on the hood of his car, butt naked. Fun times. She started hacking our phones and threatening my brother and I when my dad refused to give her his credit card information. Again, this affected his mental health and he started developing diagnosed schizophrenia and extreme paranoia, along with his previously diagnosed anxiety, depression, A date I will never forget. Honestly, I've never been a very open person. I've always been that super friendly and happy girl that seems like she has the perfect life, but no one really knows that deep. I think the only person who knows my entire story is my boyfriend, who is so great to me, and of course my little brother, who shared a lot of these experiences with me. There's a lot of things I have never had the courage to tell anyone, so here I am making my best effort. My parents got divorced when I was 5 years old and my younger brother was 2. This was really the beginning of everything falling apart for me. I know in this generation it's pretty common, but it was hard for a little girl who didn't understand why she had to go to mommy's 1 week and daddy's the next. I used to cry under my desk at recess and pray every night that they would get back together. My mom and I have never had a good relationship because of everything that has happened. She used to send me to school and daycare in shorts, no jacket, and sandals in the winter, not wanting my good clothes to go to my dad's. Keep in mind, I live in Canada. This is just one of the many things that led to the huge custody battle my mom started. My dad won and they settled on 50-50 custody, but my mom blamed a lot of it on me because I would email my dad telling him how much I missed him, and my mom took this as me taking his side. Of course, being so innocent, I always stuck up for her and thought everything was normal. My mom got remarried when I was 7. Her new husband was far from perfect. He supported us tangibly, but never emotionally. No matter how hard I tried, he was never proud of anything I did, and as a little girl, all I wanted was acceptance. He was also very aggressive, and we were terrified of him. My dad also had a girlfriend. She straight up neglected us. She had a child of her own who she barely had a relationship with. My dad worked night shifts as a refrigeration mechanic in order to support us, and she would lock herself in her room, refusing to talk to us when he was gone. I was around 7 or 8 years old when I started cooking dinner for my little brother and myself. I never told my dad because, again, I thought this was a normal thing. My dad was always telling me how he wishes my mom never gave up on him, and so he never gave up on his girlfriend, who he desperately believed could change for the better. Fast forward to 7th grade. I was 13 years old when my grandpa left my grandma and never told us. They had been married for about 30 years and he cheated on her. He moved out, never telling my brother and I, leaving us to think he was gone on a work trip and never came back. This was devastating, especially for me, because he was my best friend. My grandma became extremely depressed, having been with my grandpa since she was 16. We had to move in with her to help her take care of things, seeing as she had no idea how to do much. A few months later, my dad slipped and broke his ankle and then went to work and broke both arms. It was a year worth of surgeries and officially parenting my brother because my father physically couldn't. He had to quit his job because the nurse ended up being his ex-girlfriend who hated him, and there ended up being a malpractice which he didn't bother doing anything about. Being home all the time literally made him go insane. He developed so many mental health issues and ended up breaking up with his girlfriend. She was livid. She used to break into our house and we'd wake up to her doing dishes and stealing my clothes. No joke. One time we woke up to her in our shower, and when we tried to leave, she jumped on the hood of his car, butt naked. Fun times. She started hacking our phones and threatening my brother and I when my dad refused to give her his credit card information. Again, this affected his mental health and he started developing diagnosed schizophrenia and extreme paranoia, along with his previously diagnosed anxiety, depression, and ADHD. About a year later, he believed she was only threatening him with us because of him and thought hurting himself would save us. He tried to OD on his meds and ended up in the psych ward in the hospital. The doctors believe this did permanent damage to his brain. Of course, he was never the same after this. Because of the custody battle, I was always terrified my mom would take my brother and I away, and we'd never see him again if she knew anything relatively imperfect about him. So I hid everything from her, and she never knew he was in the hospital. The entire year, we stayed with my grandma on his days, and she'd drive us to the hospital to visit him. He tried so hard to spoil us and would make crafts for us to bring home every time we came to see him. This was so difficult for me because I had to go to bed every night without being able to say goodnight to him, and I had to go to my mom's the next day and lie about it. About a year and a half later, he could come home. This was a big change, and he had a new girlfriend by this time who also ended up being crazy. Moving on about a year later, and he tried to hurt himself again, the day after my 15th birthday. This time, my brother and I were there. I remember him running up and down the stairs, angry, dazed, and refusing help. We called the police, and my brother and I hid upstairs under my bed in fear they would call Child Protective Services. Right below my room was the front door, and so we could easily hear everything. My dad refused to go with them, and they tased him to get him to cooperate. I remember his scream like it was yesterday. This was truly one of the hardest moments of my life. He ended up back in the hospital, and again, I had to lie. After 6 months, he was okay to come home. There were times where he asked me to sit in the closet until daylight because he swore someone would come hurt us. I was the only one he could talk to. My brother and grandma told him he was crazy, but I let him vent without fear of judgment. He was my best friend. He would come into my room and cry at 2 a.m., telling me how much he loved me and how sorry he was for putting me through so much. His happier days, he would come to my room and we'd bond over music. That was our thing, trying to impress each other with our new or old rap and R&B music we think we'd like. He supported every single thing I did, and as he could come to me without fear of judgment, I could do the same with him. He tried so hard, he was honestly the best dad I could have asked for. Yes, he put me through a lot, but I would do it over again if I could. November 10th, 2017, a date I will never forget. I was 17, turning 18 in 3 months to the day. I get to my dad's and my grandma is sitting with all my uncles on the couch. They all look devastated and I don't understand why. I put forms in my stomach and I start panicking, asking where my dad is. I start running around the house, hoping to find him sleeping in one of the rooms, to no avail. The words, "I'm so sorry, your dad passed away this morning," along with the crack in my grandma's voice and tears in her eyes that follows, burns in my memory. My brother instantly starts screaming and bawling in pain, but I try not to react to make sure he's okay. I can't help but to start screaming myself. I collapse to the floor and begin rocking back and forth. I remember sitting up and saying, "You're joking, right?" about 10 times, hoping it was just some cruel joke. After that night, I became numb to the feeling. I couldn't cry. I went to the funeral a few days later with a straight face. I was so hurt that I couldn't cry no matter how I felt. My best friend was gone, and it was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever been through. His crazy new girlfriend accused me of not caring when he passed because I wouldn't give her his stuff, and then didn't show up to the funeral, proving how much she really cared. On God, I almost fought her. I ended up telling my mom everything about his mental health, to which she started resenting me for hiding for so long. This pretty much ruined our relationship, which is the reason I moved out, and with my current boyfriend about 6 months ago. Side story, I had a different new boyfriend at the time who came to the funeral with me. A week later, I caught him cheating on me. I'm now 18, and it has been almost 2 years since he passed. I moved out of my mom's because of our relationship. I live with my boyfriend, who I met in April 2018. Thankfully, I had an amazing support group who helped me get back on my feet. I'm attending university in the fall, have started my own small business, and am working full-time. Instead of allowing my devastation to victimize me, I use them to motivate me. We all have rough patches, but I am confident that as long as you are motivated and persistent in succeeding, you can, through anything.
White boys can't run. In 1966, when my Uncle Rob was a mere 10-year-old boy, he was well known for being a fast runner. According to my father, Uncle Rob wasn't just fast. He was without a doubt the fastest kid in town. However, my father is known to embellish. He also claims Eddie Murphy went to his school, although he admits that the Eddie he knew was a tall Irish redheaded kid with freckles. He was always quick to point out lots of celebrities have had plastic surgery. Being the fastest kid in town was how Uncle Rob got his job as a paperboy. His boss concluded if he was fast on his feet, he'd be even faster on a bike. Uncle Rob would get on his bike, throw a paper on the steps, and take off to the next house. If he hit a puddle, he took off faster, which fortunately didn't happen much. When he needed to get paid at the end of each month, Uncle Rob would go door to door reminding customers who he was so they would pay him. Most of Uncle Rob's customers paid promptly without any hassles. However, the last house on the street was another story. It wasn't the last house. He only saved it last as they made him work for his paper money more than the others. In 1966, many black families didn't have the luxury of a paved driveway. Instead, they just had rather hard gravel all the way up and down the street. Hard to drive on, and even harder if you were riding a bike up the hill. But that wasn't the reason why Uncle Rob didn't like this house, although it didn't help getting there any faster. Uncle Rob will never forget the first day he went to collect from the owner of that house. When he got off his bike and walked to the door, someone was already waiting for him. She was a large black woman and was waiting for him when he came up the driveway on her porch. I always pictured her chewing because a big woman always looked more intimidating when they're chewing. Maybe it's because it instills fear that if you make them mad, you'll be the next thing they chew on, so it's best to stay on their good side. When he reached the front steps, she waddled down the porch stairs and looked him straight in the eyes. Clearing her throat, she said, "So, you're that white boy who can run fast." Yes, ma'am," Uncle Rob said, wondering where this was going. "Just how fast are you?" Pretty fast, I guess." "Can I see you run?" "Well, I really should be getting back to my route. I have more papers to deliver," he lied. "I just want to see you run. Then I'll pay you. Is that too much to ask?" "Well, okay, I guess I could." "Good. Now try and catch my son," she said, smiling. "What?" Uncle Rob asked, not sure if he'd heard her right. "My son, Whippy. I need you to catch him," she said as if it was a normal request. "Well, where is he?" "Right there." She pointed to Whippy, who was slouching by a tree. Whippy was well known in the neighborhood for being a little odd, and some kids said he wasn't all there. When playing baseball, he would run every base, whether he hit the ball or was tagged out. Either he didn't understand the game or didn't care. He just liked running. Uncle Rob looked at Whippy, who, unlike his mama, was skinny and about a year younger than him. Then he looked back at the mother. "I'm not sure I understand. Your son's right there. Why should I have to catch him for you?" Whippy's mother smiled and turned to her son and hollered, "Whippy, take off!" Hearing that, Whippy bolted off as if he were on fire and took off running down the street. Whippy's mother then turned back to my Uncle Rob and smiled wider. "You want to get paid? Let me see you catch my son. We'll see who's faster." Uncle Rob looked at Whippy's mother and saw that she was dead serious. "Can I use my bike?" he asked. "Nope, that defeats the purpose. You gotta catch him on foot," she said. "Of course I do," Uncle Rob mumbled. So Uncle Rob took off after Whippy. Maybe his adrenaline kicked in, or maybe he realized it was easier to catch Whippy rather than arguing with a crazy woman. In any case, the chase was on. Whippy didn't make things easy. He didn't just run fast. He ran between every fence post, jumped every bush, and sprinted around every tree he could find like an obstacle course. If there was ever a kid who'd try and make Billy from the family circus jealous, Whippy was that kid. Eventually, Uncle Rob did catch him, and by catch I mean tagged him on the back. He wasn't about to tackle Whippy to the ground. He was a runner, not a football player. Satisfied, Whippy's mother paid Uncle Rob. As he picked up his bike, Whippy's mother called out, "See you next month." Uncle Rob's stomach lurched. There was something in the way after she said next month that let him know this wasn't just a one-time thing. Sure enough, when the next month came, Whippy and his mother were both waiting for him. This time, Whippy jumped off the porch the moment Uncle Rob's bike hit the ground. So again, Uncle Rob took off after him, and again, he managed to catch him. It was the same thing the following month, and the month after that. Eventually, Uncle Rob settled into a routine. He'd ride up the unpaved driveway, put his bike down, look at Whippy's mother and say, I know, I've got to catch Whippy," then take off running after Whippy. It's hard to say who enjoyed this more. Whippy's mother, who clearly got a lot of entertainment out of watching Uncle Rob run, or Whippy, who enjoyed making this difficult as much as was possible. Uncle Rob complained about this to his boss and parents, but his boss didn't think it was a problem. "So you have to run for your money. You're the fastest kid in town. He shouldn't be that hard to catch, his boss said. As for Uncle Rob's parents, they were too busy laughing to give any sound advice on the matter. Having no luck with his complaints, he gave up and continued with the monthly whippy chase for a year. Eventually, he got sick of it and quit the newspaper route. I can't say if Whippy and his mother played the strange game with the new paper boy. Not that they wouldn't still have enjoyed it, given their weird sense of humor. But we have no way of knowing, as Uncle Rob never saw them again. Years later, Uncle Rob went on to run track in high school. Seems the whippy chasing did some good after all. This is one of my dad's favorite childhood stories. Strangely, Uncle Rob doesn't share this sentiment. He won't talk about the story when we ask about it, not the way my dad does. None of us know where Whippy and his mother are now, or if they have their own version of this story they tell with their children and grandchildren. If they are out there, I'd like to thank them for making me laugh and giving us such a great story to tell. Be careful what you wish for. I was pretty much effed from the start. My father was a really effed up person, like molested as a child, and a Marine during Vietnam. Into every drug you can imagine, and drank like a fish. My mom was very smart, but also horribly effed up by her childhood. She was the oldest of 3 kids and had to help work and take care of the other 2 when her dad split. I was born on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. The odd thing to me is that I remember my first birthday party, and then nothing else at all until I was about 5 or 6. My dad was always in and out of the scene. Here today, gone by tomorrow. My mom was trying her best as a semi-single parent. By this time, she had become an OBGYN. Don't really remember when, but we moved to Alabama at some point. During one of the times my dad was actually around, he ended up blowing the back of his foot off with a shotgun. He was taking it back to the pawn shop he bought it from and was pulling the slide back to see if it was loaded, which, of course it was, and fired while resting it on his heel. And from here, the long, downward spiral begins. One of the earliest memories after my first birthday party is my mom going to pick deadbeat dad up from living in the bushes behind McDonald's. He was taken by helicopter to the University of Alabama hospital for hours and hours of reconstructive surgery. After a couple of weeks, he was sent home in a cast, which always struck me as odd. The wound ended up getting infected. And very long story short, they had to amputate just below the knee. Get a wonderfully terrible prosthetic paid for by the good old VA which never fit right. He was in constant pain for the rest of his life. He always had very bad phantom limb syndrome and ended up, by the time everything was said and done, taking methadone for pain management. My mom ends up getting a job offer with the state of Tennessee, so we move again. Everything goes all right for a while in a little private school in the area, basically raising myself since my parents had no idea how to raise a child and had tons of their own crap going on. We stayed stable for a couple of years before he took off again. We had to sell the property we owned and move into an apartment. She's still doing OB, and now I'm getting drugged to the hospital at all hours of the night if she has to go in. My dad shows back up, and we move into this crappy ancient house. During this time, the magical drug called Stadol came out on the market. Supposed to be a non-addictive narcotic, which it absolutely wasn't. My mom came across it because they were pushing it for use in labor pain. She ended up writing a bunch of prescriptions for it for my dad, which of course got her in hot water pretty quick. But not before my dad, my mom, and myself, at the ripe old age of 12, were addicted to it. The local medical people she worked with figured it out. She lost her license and got in trouble with the DEA. So she's effectively out of a career, and my dad has never brought any money in. So overnight we go from an upper middle class family to completely broke, living in low-income housing. After about another 2 years, my dad kills himself by taking an entire bottle of his methadone. Was having seizures and some other issues by this point as well. I remember the night it happened. I had gotten carted over to my grandparents for the night. I had an idea that something was up, but no idea what was going on. About 2 a.m, the phone rings. As soon as that first ring wakes me up, I knew exactly what had happened. A few minutes later, my grandfather takes off. After another couple of hours, the phone rings again, and it's official. So at 15, I get to see my dad's cooling corpse. During the time he was still alive, and for a while after he died, we moved all over the place with my mom, trying to get around her past DEA issues or trying to find other work. By the time I was 18, I'd lived in every single state in the Southeast. After my dad died, I started doing some work here and there to help bring in some money, and ended up working at a little computer shop in the town we lived in. I ended up homeschooling through high school. We were always moving, so there really wasn't an opportunity for a real school. Homeschooling is in quotes because I wasn't really doing the work anyway. Ended up taking my GED to get out a year early. Started working full-time in tech at that point. About this time, my mom gets diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 cervical cancer. Over the next 2 years, I spend most of my time either in or driving to and from hospitals, doctors, chemo, all manners of crap, while watching my mother slowly wither and die. A few months before her death, I took a job back in Alabama, so now I'm driving every weekend back and forth from Tennessee to Alabama. I remember the night she finally passed. I got the call about midday that I needed to get up there, so I jump in the car and book it. When I finally got there, she looked like she was dead already. If you ever saw any of the pictures of Terry Schiavo, that's pretty much what she looked like. To this day, I can't really close my eyes without seeing her like that. Within 3 years of that, I got to do it again the exact same way, first with my grandmother, then my grandfather. All the people back and forth to the doctors, watching them slowly wither, getting to be the only one there when they died. I started drinking really heavily after that, going through hundreds of dollars worth of liquor in an evening, and found not only a completely drained bottle of vodka, but one of Everclear as well. I never had time for a childhood or a teenagehood. I never had a first date, never had a first kiss, a first love. Just got taken straight from infant to fending for myself. I focused on my job and woke up one morning to discover I'd gotten my biggest goal from childhood. I wanted to be the guy running the tech department in a big national company, traveling all over, riding elevator up to my office every day. Well, I got it and realized I had sacrificed absolutely everything to get it. So now, I'm all alone. I don't believe I could ever attract a mate. I'm burned out. I hate my job. I hate my life, if you can call it that. I hate dealing with people. I hate even the interaction required to go to the store. I'd be a complete shut-in if I can manage it. But at the same time, so lonely and sad that I never learned how to actually interact with people or have a social life. I never go out socially at all, so I have pretty much no chance of ever finding someone. I'm just so tired of life, of being alone, of never having any emotional or physical contact with another human being. Tired of being out of sync with the rest of the world. Tired of being the 35-year-old virgin. Tired of being me. Just can't figure out why I keep getting up in the morning and doing the same things over and over again. Be careful what you wish for. You may just get it in the most unsatisfying way possible. My life so far. I grew up in a family of 5. I was the middle child. I was never loved by either of my parents. Neither the one contracted out to Iraq, nor the one raising me at home. This was just a biased conclusion of mine, resulting from confrontations and conversations with the both of them. I was raised in a Lutheran family, not that it matters. My life has never really had anything to do with what lies above. My best friend, since I remember, was raised in a crack house. Also not that it matters, since no outside individual has had that much of an effect on my life. Until then. I went to private schools, funded by my hardworking parents, until I decided I wanted to switch over to public high school at that level of education. Up until high school, I was always obedient and never raised any red flags with my parents. Mostly my mother, since she was the sole parental figure in my life. Father was always deployed or contracted out to a foreign country. Once high school hit, I was the typical loser at the start. Since I didn't know much of the teenager life considering my upbringings in the private schools. I had known nothing aside from Bible banging and the seasonal soccer games. From my fairly tall for my age and quite stocky, my brain led me to joining the football team, where I learned many valuable lessons of teen puberty, which are in no need to be mentioned. I went on to find a liking to running the distance races, 1 and 2 mile, in track and field that year of high school, where I then decided that next year I would join the cross-country team instead of the football team. I found to like my slimmer, handsome body that came with being on the cross-country team and decided to continue the trend by joining the swim team. This trend of handsome body forming led females to me. As females were a fairly new discovery to me, I found it quite interesting. And so, the first and possibly the only love of my life came along. It would be a lie to say that I don't remember every single encounter I ever had with her. She simply astounded me with every confrontation I had. I first saw her in the hallway, very typical of a first love from high school. She was wearing a beautiful white cardigan, blue jeans that were so tight to complement her oh so beautiful tight bottom, her hair straightened to the lower part of her back, and to top it off, the white trash sneakers indicating her trailer park livelihood. For whatever reason, I couldn't pass up my first sight of this beauty. My first passerby action on her went simply like this: "What is your name?" followed by the answer of April. And she continued on her journey to whatever class she was scheduled for. My heart damn near exploded asking that question, never being so nervous for anything up to that point in my life. As every classical high school love novel goes, I pursued my interest in her, being as beautiful as I thought she was. I didn't say a word to April for months to follow. I only passed her in the hallway, nervously thinking of what I should say. One day came where I decided to ask her to attend a school play with me, and by God, it somehow worked. April said, "Yes, I will attend the school play with you." It was something lame like Robin Hood. I had no intentions of giving the play my attention. I had all eyes, 2 of them, on her. April and I, mostly April, had a splendid time at the play. So much that she decided to join the high school actor and actress group, whatever it was named. Regardless, April and I soon became that ordinary boyfriend-girlfriend you see at school every day, kissing at the locker, walking one another to class. April and I had many memorable events that I would love to share, but I don't have the patience to share. It all seemed to end in an instant, and high school was over. Fun was forever gone, never to appear in my mind again or ever happen again. As soon as high school was over, I proposed to April. She said yes. We had a white trash wedding at the courthouse with only our best friends in attendance. Soon thereafter, parting ways to go to separate colleges. In a few explainable events, my parents were soon both led to suicide. I then found never to be the answer. With my somewhat financial stability gone, I turned to joining the military. I joined, went to the military's basic training, and was then sent off to Germany without leave. Upon my arrival in Germany, I instantly called my lovely wife to tell her of my oh-so-wonderful experiences in basic training and others up to my arrival in Germany. She sounded so effing heartbroken while talking to me. As I had previously told her that it didn't matter where I went, I wanted her to finish out her degree prior to reuniting with me. Soon enough came, as the summer season does. She and my only sibling were to come and visit me where I was stationed. They were to come on a plane June 3rd and stay until the 24th of the same month. Early on the morning of June 3rd, my wife, April, and my sister, Denise, were on the way to the airport. A drunk driver crossed over the median, killing both my only living family and my beloved wife. Here I am, on the second Christmas, without a family to belong, finally bringing my story to the public. Think running from the police is scary? Try swimming. It was summer break in 2010. Me and my friend Aaron were spending the day at the lake and stopped in to eat at a small restaurant close to the beach where we were going to. Aaron gets my attention and points at 2 really hot petite girls wearing short cutoff shorts and tank tops ordering food. They look wild and fun. We kept glancing over at them and then decided to get the balls to go talk to them when we finished eating. We asked if it was cool to sit next to them and they said, "Go right ahead." Everything we say, they laugh at, and they seem interested in us. I mostly locked eyes with the brunette, Brianna. She was shy and was giving me the "I want you" look, while the blonde, Chelsea, was more into Aaron. They were 16 and 17, just like me and Aaron. They invite us to go cliff jumping with them and we respond with, "Hell yeah." We pile into my Civic, and the first thing one of them says from the backseat is, "Do you all smoke weed?" I say, "Maybe, why do you ask?" "Because your car smells like a pot factory, dude. Do you have any?" I tell them I have 1 joint and a roach. They giggle, and Chelsea says, "Stop by my grandma's house up the road and I'll grab my party supplies before we go." So I drove them there. A few minutes later, they come out with a big beach bag wearing the same outfit but with their shorts unbuttoned, exposing their bikini bottoms and having their hair fixed more. "Gosh darn," says Aaron to me. We agreed we were in for a fun time, and I slipped 3 condoms from my glove compartment to my right shoe. We got vodka, Pepsi, some more weed, and an extra something for us. My brother hooks me up when I want. We park at the beach and follow them to the spot. Had to walk about a quarter mile down the road and sneak through people's yards and head down the trail in the woods, enjoying the view of their backsides bounce with each step. After seeing no trespassing signs, I ask them what happens if we get caught. And they tell us a lot of teens come down here to party. They just try and keep them out. We reach the cliff spot and it's very secluded. The girls strip down to their bikinis and I wonder how the heck I'm supposed to hide my erection in my swimming trunks. They tell us before we get effed up that we have to check for rocks in the water so we don't end up dead. We followed them down the cliff and grabbed a really long branch to help them check. As long as we jumped about 6 feet out, we were safe from the cliff drop. As soon as they reached the top, they both jump without telling us, and Aaron looks down and says, "F no." They climb back up and laugh at us and tell us they'll show us their tees if we jump. They raise their bikini tops and we jump in with our jaws dropped. The wind sounds like a tornado, and then I see pitch black when I hit the water. I swim up towards the sunlight and gasp for air. They woot for us and jump down to join us. Chelsea swims to Aaron and Brianna swims to me. We splash each other and climb back up to the top. Brianna smacks my backside and tells me to climb faster, and I let her in front of me so I could smack hers and mock her. We reach the top and decide to break out the good stuff. Chelsea rolls up a joint while Aaron lights up ours, and Brianna passes me the cotton candy vodka after she takes a swig. Me and Aaron sat impressed watching the girls chief on the roach until it burnt their fingers. We talk and laugh, and Chelsea pulls a small baggie out of her cigarette pack and asks if we've ever done coke. We lie and say a few times, and they snort the first lines off her makeup mirror and pass it to Aaron first. I take my first snort nervous as heck. A rush of awesomeness pours through my head like a dam being opened to fill an empty river. Like I just scratched off the numbers to a winning lottery ticket. They grab our arms and make us get up and make us run with them to jump again. This time, the fear was gone, and it was a pure adrenaline rush. The girls whisper to each other on the climb back up, and they tell us we're doing belly button shots. So we slurp shots from their pierced belly buttons, and they did ours in a much more sexual way with a slow lick. After joint number 2 and another coke bump, one thing led to another, and Brianna was riding me like a rodeo bull standing waist deep in the water below the cliff. I didn't even say, let me grab a condom, after she wrapped her legs around me and was dry humping me with her tongue in my mouth. With the orange light from the sunset glowing on her beautiful face, it was on. After we finished, Chelsea asked if we were okay down there, laughing at us as we climbed back up. Aaron was pulling up his shorts, catching his breath with a smile like I'd never seen on his face before. We started passing the bottle again, and the sound of a CB radio echoed through the woods. I look over and see a flashlight and panic. We hide everything, and a sheriff and another officer walks up the path to us. You kids having a good time? We got some noise complaint from the folks who own this property. Aaron says we will leave, sir, and he walks closer to us. Are you smoking a little pot? I look at the others frozen as I was going to say, no, sir. He grins and says, what are y'all's names? Chelsea asks if we're in trouble, and he tells us that we're trespassing on private property and asks to check her bag. We all look at each other and blurt out, run! And we all run and jump down to the water. I rose up to the surface and made sure they all followed me and started swimming like an Olympic swimmer towards the other side of the lake. Stop, 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 we will find you. He starts shining his flashlight at the water, and we go under every time it shines on us. We make it to the other side and start climbing up the muddy bank, sinking knee deep with each step. We lay on the shore, catching our breath after the 2 football field length swim. Chelsea tells us she left her wallet and phone in my car with the rest of ours. Thank God. We look across the top of the cliff at the flashlights and get up and start running through the woods barefoot. We crouch down by a fallen tree and catch our breath again. Talking about how we are from the cocaine and weed in her bag they are looking through right now, we decided to start swimming towards the parking lot along the shoreline. After about 30 minutes of swimming, we see a boat coming towards us with a spotlight and swim to a huge fallen tree in the shallow water to hide. They slow down and shine the light everywhere. I hold Brianna and calm her down from crying and wait for it to pass. When it does, we slowly move down the shore with just our heads out of the water. After over an hour, we swim across the lake again and sneak up the hill to the parking lot. Thank God there were other cars parked there from the campsite next to the beach, or my car would be quite obvious. I get my keys from the gas tank door and drive the girls home. I tell Brianna my number and she puts it in her phone, and Chelsea did the same for Aaron. We were stupid for not getting their numbers because they never called or texted us. We didn't even ask for their last names and spent hours looking for them on Facebook. We didn't find them. I pulled out and would have expected Brianna to call me if she were pregnant. We drove to her grandma's house a couple weeks later, and no one was home, so we decided to leave them alone. To this day, me and Aaron have laughs about that night when our wives aren't around. The town where everyone honks. I used to travel a great deal. Part of that was due to the nature of my job, but the rest fell back to a lifelong interest in seeing quaint little country towns. Frankly, I loved touring the wide open road in my sporty convertible and discovering new haunts along the way. It made the soulless drudgery of life a bit more bearable for me. In all of my years traveling for work or pleasure, though, I never uncovered another place quite like the strange little town of Newton. It is unique. I stumbled across this virtual time capsule by pure coincidence. I'd meant to take the freeway to a much more familiar destination, but somehow missed the turn. From that point on, my plans went completely off the rails. All of a sudden, I found myself smack dab in the middle of a bizarro time warp. Honestly, I could scarcely even believe the place was real. The sleepy little community I discovered by pure happenstance is an amazing tribute to a bygone era. Every car which passed me by on the road was a vintage automobile. At first, I assumed I'd stumbled onto a classic car parade or a showcase rally for professional restorations, but there was no newer model cars anywhere to be seen. It was genuinely startling, and that wasn't the only odd thing either. Not by a long shot. Everywhere I looked, I saw long outdated technology and forgotten signs of the past. The gas pumps didn't even have a pay at the pump feature, and regular fuel was still an option here. I was dumbstruck by the very notion that leaded gas was still available. I thought it had been outlawed for years. Another thing which struck me as rather strange was the unwavering commitment each motorist had to honk at each other as they passed by. It wasn't an angry, blaring blast of fury to release frustration either. They just tooted their horns lightly at each other and then waved as a polite greeting. Frankly, watching that social exchange was surreal. I never witnessed anyone honk their horn as a gesture of respect. In larger towns and metropolitan cities I frequented, a horn blast is primarily used as a sonic weapon. A few sharp honks are typically issued to chastise the poor driving skills of the other driver. There in Newton, however, I found it to be an exclusive courtesy response. Before I could expend any more effort analyzing this incredibly different behavior, I witnessed a number of other startling things. The town had an honest-to-goodness drive-in movie theater and a soda fountain counter downtown. It was a welcome slice of lovely Americana, which I assumed was long gone. An involuntary smile crept across my face as I drank it all in. Unsurprisingly, the prices for food, fuel, and other general commodities were in line with the same distant time period. I stopped in to look over the available wares of a Woolworth dime store. It was eye-opening. The atmosphere was that of the early 1970s hometown USA. Even the dress style of the employees and customers suggested a blast from the past. Large collars, sideburns, wingtip shoes, and horn-rimmed glasses dotted the idyllic landscape. Small kids were outside jumping rope and playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. In one well-manicured neighborhood, I witnessed a young man delivering newspapers door to door by his bicycle. The whole thing was incredible. At first, I was too stunned to do anything other than walk around and stare in bewilderment at the unexpected time capsule. That soon, however, gave way to opportunity. At the town dealership, almost new-looking classic cars were available for used clunker prices. I had to decide whether I wanted to buy a stunning 1969 Dodge Charger or a beautiful Corvette Stingray for the equivalent of a couch cushion change. In reality, I wanted to buy both of them and a dozen other underpriced treasures, but no business in town accepted credit cards. I only had enough cash in my wallet to buy one of those jaw-dropping beauties. If there had been an ATM, I would have loaded up a whole car carrier full of gas-guzzling American muscle cars of the past and miscellaneous antique finds. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option. Back driving on the main highway, the motorists honked at each other and waved dutifully. I was a bit amused to realize that I wasn't worthy of a honk for many of them. Obviously, they could tell I was an outsider. I found myself envying those tight-knit townsfolk who knew and respected each other. It never occurred to me that I wasn't honking at any of them first. Once I realized that in the sleepy bygone town, you probably had to give a toot to get one. I initiated the process and received my very first friendly honk. I was thrilled, and it made me grin again in fulfillment. It felt absolutely fantastic to finally be accepted in such a personal way. Right then and there, I decided I was so in love with the magical place that I wanted it to become my hometown too. I begrudgingly drove my new 1969 Charger Hemi RT back toward my current home address with a level of satisfaction I'd never experienced before. I had honest intentions of packing up all my possessions and permanently settling in Newton immediately. But I decided there was always time for that necessary responsibility later. On. I felt too good behind the wheel to spoil the moment. Instead, I gripped the stick and desperately wished to continue acclimating to my newly adopted home. It was completely intoxicating. I received dozens of courtesy honks and waves from my new neighbors as I tried to locate the interstate on-ramp. The sooner I gathered up my things, the sooner I could initiate my permanent departure from my old life and start my new one. I was certain the way out of town had to be nearby, but I couldn't manage to locate the exit. There were no signs. I must have driven in circles for hours. Finally, I threw up my hands in surrender and gave up. Leaving to tie my loose ends just didn't feel important anymore. I was hungry, and Dave's Drive-In had a special on a burger, fries, and chocolate malt shake for $1.35. A man's gotta eat, right? Luckily, the miracle of 5G internet even reaches the outskirts of Newton airwaves, so I'm sending out this final notification to my friends, family, and employers. I'm not coming back. I found a great job as a mechanic at Roston's Garage, a good apartment downtown, and tomorrow, I'm going to ask out Sarah the waitress from the soda fountain. Wish me luck. Being a nice guy got me a new job. So this started about a year ago. I've been working as a full-time chef for the past 12 or 13 years or so, and last January, I was thinking about getting an extra job on the side. I've been more or less single for the past 3 years, and I've shared custody of my 2 kids, so I have plenty of spare time to make some extra cash. I went to my local grocery shop and asked if they needed an extra hand. Now, I didn't have any experience of this kind of work, but I'm a service-minded, positive, and helpful guy, and the manager was eager to have a relatively young, 30 years old, man from the local area on the team, as the majority of the staff are middle-aged women. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but diversity is positive. He was also intrigued by having someone with a full-time job come to him and directly ask for work, as job applications usually are more formal and less personal. So I started almost immediately, and after a short time, I fell in love with the work, the team, and the fact that it's just a 5-minute drive from home. I eagerly expressed my interest in more hours and told the manager I would love a full-time job if the opportunity was there. I was so happy working there, I could easily take a morning shift at the store, followed by an afternoon shift at my full-time job without feeling exhausted in any way. Rather, the opposite. My overall happiness got a serious boost from being welcomed, working extra, and doing my part for helping others. I was told I was very welcome, as my chemistry with both my coworkers and customers, as well as my tempo and quick learning, was much appreciated. They also have a relatively large hardware and building materials section of the store, with a separate team that had an open position to start immediately. But the contract with my full-time job prevented this. As my notice period was 2 months, we were in such a busy time of year that I had already promised to stay there at least until the end of the year. Sadly, there were also no openings at the grocery store at that time. And fast forward about 6 months, I was so busy with my full-time job that I didn't have any more shifts for the latter half of 2019. Come January 2020, my full-time job got less busy as usual at this time of year, and I had some extra time and energy to work at the store again. I talked to the manager, and he was as excited as I was about continuing the work relationship. Not even before I could have my first shift this year, I got a call from the manager this Monday asking me to come and have a chat. Turns out, one of the 2 employees at the hardware store had delivered his resignation the previous Friday, and they wanted me to fill that position. As last time, they needed someone to start as soon as possible, so I talked to my managers at the hotel I've been working at for most of my grown-up life and told them this was something I really wanted to pursue, and that if I was unable to start straight away, the opportunity would pass me by. Note, I've been completely open with them about my second job, how I really liked working there, and that this was something I wanted to pursue if I got the chance. I've also assured them that it's not about wanting to leave the hotel, but the time has come for me to try something else. Also, my full-time job is 35 minutes away from home, so I could save more than 1 hour a day and probably $2,000 every year in gas money by working at the store. I was met with understanding in every possible way, and they would ignore my notice period for helping me take this opportunity. They even said I'm more than welcome to come back if this somehow doesn't feel right. As of writing this, I got the phone call from the manager telling me I can start as soon as I want to. Now I just have to arrange things with my managers at the hotel, and then it's just a matter of days or weeks until my first day at the new job. I wanted to tell you this for several reasons. For one, there is the advice of trying something new and do it as best as you can. Being a nice guy paid off, both in getting the opportunity for a new job and the fact that my previous employer helped me land it. Here in Norway, there is some stigma around working in grocery shops. Some see it as something you do just because you need the money and not something you do because you want to. I'm hoping to show as many people as possible that this is a misconception and to show my kids that working in retail, grocery, or hardware is just as rewarding and somewhat important as my other job. I'm not going to go all inspirational on you, but I really wanted to share. This evening, I'm going on a weekend trip with my family, and I'm so excited to tell them the news. I know they'll be happy for me, and my kids will be over the moon to find out I'll be working closer to home. Too long, didn't read. Took an extra job beside my full-time job, and being nice, positive, and interested landed me a new full-time job closer to home with no other relevant education than a good upbringing. Thank you. My first toxic bee experience. As I was growing up through high school, I was your typical shy nerd, not many friends, niche interests. You know who I'm talking about. I thought I had a knack for being likable. In reality, I was probably just good at picking my audience. At the end of high school, I bounced off to college with a risky combination of social inexperience and unrefined interpersonal observation skills. Things went badly. I was lucky enough to have been paired with good roommates. They were better at making friends than I was, so I just naturally latched on to the friend group they were growing. Enter the star of the show, Amanda. Let me say this in the kindest possible way. Describing her as a toxic bee is an understatement. Let's make a list of her problems. 1. Practically every interaction I had with her involved some type of reference to her love life. Spoiler, she doesn't have a very good one. One of her first interactions with me was to comment on how similar I looked to her current boyfriend. On another occasion, I asked her if it would be accurate to say that she had an ex-boyfriend story for every situation. Without hesitation, yup. This obsession with her romantic life would be her defining characteristic for the time that I knew her. 2. She was, without question, one of the most shallow and negative people I have ever met. Every other word out of her mouth was in service of antagonizing, belittling, or insulting someone or something. I'm entirely convinced that the only reason she managed to worm her way into the social group was that she lived across the hall from us. 3. She had a complete lack of social grace and respect. She constantly attempted to derail or hijack the conversation she participated in. She needed attention and was not subtle in her efforts to acquire it. All of these things went straight over my head, and Amanda saw this. You see, while the above behaviors were things that everyone had to endure, I suffered each of them triple-fold, particularly point number 2. Amanda took every chance she could to villainize, ostracize, or belittle me. By the midterm, I noticed that I was drifting away from the social group, though I still didn't know why. It all clicked when I had to, quote, attend. In other words, take a selfie of myself at several campus events as part of a class assignment. I walked over to the ticket booth. They had just finished with someone. One, hey guys, and a selfie later, I had what I needed. Amanda storms over and, in front of another group member, accuses me of being insensitive towards the attendance. They only had 1 or 2 people in line, and the selfie took all of 5 seconds. As we walk, she escalates my transgression from being insensitive to me being a person that lacks empathy. I was stupid enough to take her comments to heart and ended up with a student counselor talking about how lonely I was and how I felt I wasn't good enough for my friends. And as I poured everything out, the pieces suddenly fit together. Amanda was a bully, and I was her victim. Moreover, I knew why. Amanda had been having troubles with her boyfriend, no surprises there. But the reason she was sticking with him, in spite of this, was due to the fact that she had me as her emotional release valve. All of the frustrations, insecurities, and unhealthy emotions from her relationship were being channeled directly at me. I stopped taking her crap. I talked back. Things got better. I never got the chance to tell her everything that I had learned. Amanda stole from the group and was basically excommunicated from the only social group she had. Last I heard, she got pregnant from her boyfriend and settled down with him. I hope the kid will be okay. But with a mom like that, I don't like their odds. I know I'm a better person because I knew you, Amanda. I know because I can say now what I couldn't then. Little ways that I remember my dad. When I was growing up, my dad got frequently sick because of his doctor. I remember one time when I was very little, he looked absolutely ghostly, laying in bed, groaning, and unable to breathe for hours at a time. I wanted so bad to help him that my kid logic told me if I act more like Dad and like the things that he likes, that'll make him happy and he'll get better. And I decided to do just that. So I went into his room and asked him what his favorite color was. He told me that he really liked blue, red, and green. In that order, too. After that, I made it my mission to make blue my favorite color, because that was the one he said first. It took a while, but he did get better. Of course, my method didn't work, but at the time, I believed it did. Once during the summer, I woke up early to see my dad making a cup of coffee. I can't remember the brand, but he made it black, took it to the kitchen table where I was sitting, added 2 tablespoons of sugar, and took a gulp. I think he noticed me staring at it and offered me a sip. I, of course, took one. I remember how strange the taste was at first, but once I tasted the sugar, I loved it. He went out for a smoke when it was halfway done, and I may or may not have drank the rest. I definitely inherited his sweet tooth, because when I tried my mom's coffee made with cream, I literally started gagging. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever tasted. After trying both their coffees, I would occasionally steal sips of my dad's coffee. I say the best memory that I have of my dad, though, was when he took me on a 2-day trip out of the province. At the time, he worked at a trucking company, and he drove a heavy-duty semi-truck with a driver's seat, passenger seat, and a bed in the back. He told me before we left that he just had to pick up something and that nobody was allowed to know I was there. Company policy, I think. I hid in the bed and put his heavy sweater over my head as I was sitting up. Completely unnecessary. He told me so himself, but I was paranoid. After we left, I would crawl from the bed to the passenger seat periodically and talk to him basically the whole trip. This may not seem that special, but for me, it was like a dream come true. My dad worked long hours, and all I ever wanted to do was spend more time with him. The whole drive, he listened to all of my stories, whether they were about a show I watched, school, or just about characters that I had made up. I talked so much that looking back on it now, I'm amazed he never told me to be quiet. We stopped at A&W along the way multiple times since we both liked their burgers and root beer. For context for this next part, I grew up in a hamlet with very little lights at night. I loved seeing cities after dark. Every sign, shop, restaurant, anywhere that had light was mesmerizing to me. When we made it to the city where he had to deliver his load to, it was around 10 p.m., and I was on the verge of passing out. My dad was so excited to show me the lights, though, he kept telling me to stay up just a little longer because he knew just how much I loved seeing the lights. He told me that the city we were going to was beautiful at night and that I would absolutely love it. He was right. It was breathtaking for me, to say the least. I still passed out before we were in the city, though. In the morning, he brought me a sprinkled donut and a chocolate glazed donut for himself from Tim Hortons as a breakfast and told me not to let my mom know. I'm sorry that this is so long to whoever is reading this, but I'm just about done. I found my dad dead when I was 9. He was always so sick, so the short time that I had with him was agony for him. And to know that hurts me, because after that road trip, I know without a doubt that he wanted more time with me too. My favorite color is still blue, and I always associate navy blue specifically with my dad since that always looked best on him. I drink my coffee black, never with cream, but always with plenty of sugar. Even though I now live among bright lights, they've never stopped being beautiful to me. A&W now gives me a warm, nostalgic feeling, especially when the sun comes in at just the right angle. And finally, Tim Hortons glazed chocolate and sprinkled donuts remind me of the best time that I ever had with my dad, and always manage to put a smile on my face to remember, don't tell Mom that we are having donuts for breakfast. She won't like that. All of these little things help me to remember all the moments we had. Even if our time together wasn't long, it still meant something to me. I carry those memories with me forever. I overdosed once. I grew up with a wonderful childhood. Any toy I wanted, great house with a pool, hot tub, playground, etc. Trips to Disney World every year, loving parents, etc. It came crashing down when I was 12. Dad cheated on my mom, which caused me to hate men. We moved to a new town, got bullied. Left halfway through the year of my 8th grade as a then 13-year-old and got homeschooled for the second half of that year. Started realizing I was gay at 13, which caused me self-hatred. Went back to school in a new town as a freshman, made some in-class friends, kept to myself. Didn't socialize whatsoever after school with my friends, no matter how many times they'd ask over the course of my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. Over the course of those 3 years, I lived in small spaces with 5 people. My mom, me, my sister, and my 2 younger brothers. I was a third parent and dealt with seeing my father and hating him every week. I was also dealing with and coming to terms with my sexuality. It was torture. I spent a lot of time watching and loving reality shows. Senior year, I realized I was going to be an adult very soon and that I needed to change things. Force myself to socialize more outside of school. Force myself out of the closet to my friends. Realized I was popular among people because I'm very nice and gay, attractive, tall, kind of a nerd. Started experiencing relationships and dating at almost 19 when I went to my community college. Started to date the leader of the school's GSA club. It made me feel elated and happy, like I could open up to people. It ended with him basically telling my newfound friends behind my back, I need to be mean to him so he learns about life. Because I was an innocent doe in the sense of social politics. I moved on from him. Moved to another guy a year later who was the epitome of bad communication. I misread so many things about him, and as time went on, I self-imploded. I did stupid things like inhale over 30 cans of Duster in a month, down entire boxes of medicine like Benadryl and Quercetin, and I crashed my car that I had just started to drive a month prior. He wasn't an angel, but I was the bad guy in the situation. He was 4 years older than me. I ended up overdosing on one of the boxes. I did an entire box of Quercetin, and I could feel that something was wrong in my body. So I fessed up to my mom, and she freaked out. Went to the hospital and was in the ICU for 2 days. After I got out of the hospital, they put me in a psych ward. Did a lot of self-reflecting. Got out, and 2 weeks later I had to go back in because I made a stupid mistake. Decided to do half a box of Benadryl. When I was in the second time, I realized I needed to make better decisions for myself if I wanted to make the most of my life. At this point, I was 20. I met a guy in there the second time who was really nice. He got out, and I got out later that day. He asked me to come over since he was relatively close to where I lived with my mom. I did end up getting a new car at this point in time. He wanted me to do meth with him and have sex. I can remember very clearly that I was at a serious fork in the road and that I needed to make a good decision for myself. So I left. Got a job at a place that was social and fun, local Dunkin' Donuts. Started thinking about who I am and what I want out of life. I was also still friends with the same guy who had bad communication. He was a nice person at the end of it all. A few months later, by this point it was June 2016, when I was 20 and a half, I had gone a little psycho out of the sadness feelings for second partner, and he blocked me. I was so upset that I ran into the woods and cut myself a lot, on my leg and arm. Instant regret. I pulled myself together and forced myself to move on. Less than a month later, I met someone new who was super sweet and fun. He ended up being a meth head who was HIV positive. I'm not infected, thank God. I know because it's been 3 years. He did horribly vindictive things like tell me, I can't talk to you right now, I'm at a gangbang. The weirdly specific thing is that he got addicted to the same guy who offered it to me. He and I were opposites in the decisions we made. I realized that life is about making good decisions. Spent another year and a half being toyed with by an a-hole alcoholic guy who manipulated my emotions. I was meanwhile living out of my car for over a year. Then, about 2 years ago, I got a job as a travel agent. Forced myself to get over an alcoholic guy. I started living on my own and making great money. I started traveling the world. I only got the job because of how well I sold myself, which I had no sales or travel experience other than Disney World. I've been able to formulate an idealistic life plan versus a realistic life plan. I'm shooting for the higher set of dreams, but I've got a great backup plan with my corporate travel agency in place, currently set to become a manager of my own store. Respect. A tale between my ex and I. 4 months ago, I got into an argument with my then girlfriend, who I've dated for 2.5 years. The context was that she was at the local mall on Black Friday and wanted to stay there until closing time for the mall. I was confused on why she wanted to stay, so not wanting to get into details on why, I just told her that she should probably leave the mall because it's Black Friday, and I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. She texted me and said that she was all right and was with her friend, so I just simply replied with okay and left it there. The next day, I went onto Instagram to see what was going on with the world, and I noticed a picture of my ex in a skimpy outfit with her tongue out, sucking on a lollipop. So now my chest began to thump deeply. I asked her what was up with her, and she said not to bother. I was disappointed with the response and asked again, and this began an argument that lasted over 10 hours. Then she said probably the worst thing I could hear or read. Why are you so overbearing? Which to me says stop caring. This ticked me off. I've done so many things for her to show her that I cared for her, and that's what she tells me? So much so that when she realized she couldn't win the argument, she dragged her mother into it to tell me to stop. Not wanting to be disrespectful, I complied. The next day, I just go onto my phone and text her, if you want me to stop caring, I'll stop. She then texts, I love you, I was confused. You can't go one day and say that I should stop caring, and then say I love you the next. So I thought that if she wanted me not to care, that's what I was going to do. And that's what I did. It took her a week to realize something was up. It was also during this week I began to realize how she probably wasn't the right person for me. She called me and asked why I was so uncaring about her anymore. I told her to look at last week. I also told her that I'm upset with her because of many reasons. She told me to stop caring. She doesn't take my advice. She wore a skimpy outfit at the mall on Black Friday to probably get attention from other guys. I wasn't getting any appreciation for anything I did for her. And she was not there for me when I came to her and told her that my dad has cancer, while I was there for her 2 weeks straight when her cat passed away. The words I said sent her into tears, like she heard her cat died again. She told me she knows that she has a problem and was going to fix it. I said that was fine. She would proceed to not speak to me for the next few days. Then that took a whole week. Then 2 weeks. Then a whole month. She would also give me dirty looks and pretend not to notice me in the hallways. But just a bit after the new year, I had enough. A few days before the breakup, I started to take all the photos I had of the both of us on my Instagram. I could tell that she was stalking me because she would proceed to do the same. I also started to realize when she didn't speak to me, I became happier by the day. The day of the breakup, I wrote a closure text to tell her that I don't want to wait anymore because of the way she was doing things, and offered to just be friends. She finally answered me by saying that she, quote, hopes that I can find someone that can treat me better, and then proceeded to not speak to me. She would also begin to unfollow me on everything from Snapchat to Instagram. It wasn't until 2 weeks ago that I realized that she was still following me on my second Instagram account. So I just decided to write another closure to tell her how I really felt. I wrote that I didn't know if she still had feelings for me or just forgot. Her plan to block me out of life had failed. I also proceeded to say that I have been living my best life without her since then, and she should just give up the attitude she has towards me. And I also threw in that my dad was, okay, thank you for asking, and I didn't need anything. You've done enough. I felt great for the next 3 hours until my best friend, who was also her friend, out of the blue, decided to defend her, saying it wasn't right. I told him I did her a favor, and I was the better person through all this because she was acting like a child, and he should stop listening to the garbage she was feeding him like she was doing to me when we were dating. Me knowing that she asked him to defend her, like her mom had to be dragged into our argument 4 months ago. Am I an a-hole for doing that closure? I don't think so, but I wanted to hear what you think. Hopeless. The alarm rang. 6:30 a.m. He turned it off and looked up at the ceiling. Am I living or surviving, he thought. After all, working 12 hours a day and going to college on the remaining time is not much of a life. I managed to get up after some time. He checked the time on his phone. 6:53. He's going to be late again. His boss will complain about him. This is a bad day after all, maybe the worst of the year, he talks to himself as he gets ready to leave without any emotion. He manages to get out of the house eventually. His house is 4 minutes from the bus stop. Time is around 7:20. He's not running because the bus goes around 7:28 at that stop. Just when I'm getting to the street, the bus goes by. It's too far to make it running. It's hopeless anyway. He's starting to think he's going to get busted. And he's starting to think about it. He starts thinking about why he does this, why he cares. He works at a crappy job that barely pays the bills anyway. His boss is the devil in person. The company buys the workers for $3 an hour and sells them for $15 an hour. He knows it. His position has access to such reports. Every time he remembers that the boss's son is his coworker and he receives better wages than him and doesn't do anything, he gets even more demotivated. He looks at his hand. He looks at his hands and thinks, I'm only here for her. If not for her, I would have left this planet already. He looks around. The bus stop got crowded without him noticing. He looks to the left, and the bus is coming. 7:44. His shift starts at 8 o'clock, and he's only taking the first bus. There's 2 more to go after this one. The bus stops, he gets in. Bus is crowded. The rest of the people get in too. The bus feels like a tuna can. He observes the surroundings. There are people talking and laughing, people on the phone texting. Everyone seems so happy. Even the bus is at least 1 double maximum capacity. He sneaks his hand into his backpack. It's a hard task since he can barely move his arms. He grabs his headphones, plugs them in. Life gets 2% better. He does not hear the useless talking now. He's isolated. The bus arrives at the terminal. He rushes towards the next one. Just as before, another tuna can. It's midwinter. He left home with 2 coats. However, the amount of people produces extreme amounts of human heat. He's sweating already. He takes off the coats as he walks onto the bus. It's 8:03 already, and he's far from work. He's gotten to a point where he doesn't care anymore. Today is a bad day after all, just like yesterday. Time goes by. The bus leaves the terminal at 8:10. He is 10 minutes late already. The bus leaves only to stop a couple of meters ahead. Traffic. Intense traffic. It's peak hour. The city's grown insanely in population in the last 10 years. No roads were planned. Average speed is 20 kilometers an hour. His bus needs to cross the city to get to the other terminal. He feels like a gasoline doll. The bus starts and stops every 50 meters. His body waves left and right. This goes for about 30 minutes when he finally makes it to the other terminal. 8:40 now. He goes to where the last bus stops, looks at the board for the bus schedule. Last one left 8:35. Next one is 9:15 a.m. He's not mad, not sad. He does not feel anything at all. He feels empty, with zero motivation and will. He sits and waits, watching people go by. There he is, an empty human being watching other empty human beings rushing towards their work just as he is. Maybe I shouldn't complain that much, is the thought that revolves around his mind. He just snaps out of his thoughts, gets a piece of paper and a pen, and then starts drawing the terminal structure. He starts with the pillars, big black metal bars, then proceeds to the ceiling, metal bars installed in some kind of web shape. There are iron bars everywhere. He draws the signs. His bus arrives. He checks the time and it's 9:13. He hops inside the bus and gets a seat. This is the only bus that does not feel like a pressure cooker. He gives a small smile and remembers that he is hungry. Maybe that's why he made so many analogies with food. The bus starts and leaves the terminal. He's almost to hell. How I meet again. So I don't really know how to title this. Let me just begin. Back when I was a kid, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I loved it there till I was in the 6th grade. I moved around a lot too. The neighbor which I'm talking about owned a 2-story house next to my family's 1-story house. We lived in that house for a total of 3 years and then moved to a new neighborhood. During these 3 years, me and my brother rarely went outside. Our parents didn't like the idea. Besides, studying to them was a higher priority than anything else, as they were first-generation immigrants and preferred us to get a good education. Anyway, here's where things get interesting. Our parents decided to go to Los Angeles, California. Fine by us. We didn't quite care where we lived, although it was difficult to say goodbye to all of those friends. After having lived 2 years in California, my mom decided to sign me and my brother up for an acting camp. There, I attended the 13 and under class, while my brother attended the 13 and older class. One of the days, we had an exercise where 2 people would tell a story, one made up and one real. Me and another guy convinced the teacher to let us both tell a true story. The story I chose coincidentally took place the few times I went outside in that neighborhood which I lived in for 3 years. In the story, I, for some reason, named both the city and state I lived in as well as the neighborhood. One of the girls who was in my class had around 10 people, asked me after the fact came out that both stories were true. Firstly, she asked where I lived in that neighborhood. I told her right before the speed bump. Then she asked if my family grew things in our backyard, to which I replied that was true too. And lastly, she asked if I had gone outside with my brother to play before, and I replied that was true as well. And as such, I managed to meet my neighbor who I never knew until now across the country in a small acting camp in a class of roughly 10 students. At first, I couldn't believe it myself. Maybe I had forgotten the actual name of the neighborhood and simply agreed with her because it sounded familiar. But everything she described was accurate. Her house was indeed 2 stories and ours 1. We did indeed live with our grandparents. Me and my brother did indeed go outside sometimes. The addresses matched. The city and states matched. Of course, I was pretty dumbfounded with such a coincidence. What are the odds that 2 kids' parents decide to move across the country to, albeit a popular city, to roughly the same region in the city and sign their children up the same year to the same small acting camp? And what are the odds that I tell that story out of the many which I could have told? And the odds that I listed the city and state where I lived? Oh, and the girl pretty blatantly tried to flirt with me during that class. Didn't particularly like her, but she definitely had a crush on me. Quite touchy if you know what I mean. This is just some extra info at this point. When we did some games, she liked clinging to me or talking with me every chance she got. I was actually turning 13 very soon during that camp, and as such was far more mature than the 10 or 11-year-olds in that class. I still remember one girl sitting in my lap against my protests because she wanted to win a game. Boy, did I feel flustered then. Well, it's always cool to reflect on the past. Get that type of immaturity going again. Just thinking about it makes me think about luck and how awkward I was back then. Sad story from my life. I come back to school after the Christmas holidays, and we have a new girl in our class. We don't talk much at first, since she seems pretty introverted. Soon, she joins my friend group, and we start talking a lot more. I discover she's a gamer girl, and we transition into talking a lot on Discord, too. We talk a lot, sometimes 4 to 6 hours on calls until 2 a.m. I get to know her. She seems really nice, and I get an illusion that I might have a chance of dating her. We carry on being friends for a month with a small, insignificant argument here and there, about things like not caring about each other or not being honest when we annoy each other. We get pretty close and become best friends. She tells me things about her never having a crush, which is understandable since she's young and gets on better with boys than girls. Anyway, we kind of start arguing more frequently for stupid reasons. I admit I was responsible for about half, but once we get that far, she wants to end the friendship, and I go along. We have a pretty deep discussion ending in us realizing we can't replace each other and realizing we have to let go. She asked things like, "Why do you care for me?" So far, we've only been arguing online and acting normal or avoiding each other in real life. Well, that was about to change. The next morning, she messages me with the idea of, let's not talk over messages and just talk in real life, since everything's okay in real life. I go along since I don't want to lose her as a friend, and that argument was generally stupid. So everything goes normal for the next couple of weeks. In 1 week, it gets serious. It was a normal day at school. I came back home and I felt that things were different. We didn't talk much now because of the arguments. I really didn't enjoy being with her, and I decided to write her some message describing how attached I was, how two-faced she acted, acting normal in real life, but then saying dumb stuff in arguments, how much I didn't want to argue, and that something had to change. Well, it turned out to be a 960-word message. Her response was pathetic. Furthermore, I found out she was annoyed by me expressing my emotions. For time's sake, I can summarize her response. Okay, don't suppress your emotions. I didn't expect this. I expected some kind of understanding. Once again, one morning, we get into some argument. She explains her lack of interest as a lack of human emotion when I tried to understand what is wrong with her, like what I did wrong. I didn't understand why we didn't understand each other. Things were about to escalate. Right now, I feel clueless and very confused, not knowing what the best thing to do is. I keep messaging her and trying to figure things out, to understand her at the very least. We get to a very dodgy area. She starts saying things like, "You think I would ask for someone to care about me? No, I want everyone to forget about me, so I can finally effing kill myself without hurting anyone." That was when things started to head south. I took it as some sort of joke at first. She joked about suicide a lot before, but now I was a bit concerned. Later, she sends the message of, "You want to see my arm? Oh no, you will think it's an attention-seeking thing." I go along. She sends a pic of her arm scratched to near bleeding. As I later found out, it's not the first year of her doing this. Just before, it wasn't as severe. I felt bad like anyone would. The same day after school, I message her that I feel bad. I know it wasn't because of me, but the least I could have done is be there for you and not annoy you with arguments. My feelings didn't matter at that point because she was my best friend for a while and I wanted to help. We message a bit. She's very hostile. I want to help. She doesn't take it. I ask why she says it's none of my business. It was my business. If it wasn't, I wouldn't feel bad. She says, just because I showed you a picture of my arm, you don't have to start pretending you feel bad for me. Introduce SB, suicide buddy, or her now best friend. SB is a 13 to 14-year-old male that attempted suicide last year in the previous grade and is now her best friend. She said things like, because if I died, you wouldn't care. I just need to get my family to stop caring. Then, SB, then I can be free. Is that enough escalation? No? It's about to get much worse. From the previous conversation, I realized she was really suicidal or was trying to fake it. It seemed fake to me at the time because she had no reason to do it. She had friends, she had family. Turns out she had to go to a therapist a couple of years ago for the same reason. I still don't know. Probably those scratches were from a year ago. She tells me she's a very morbid person and there's nothing wrong. I start realizing that I can't help her. I'm clueless about what to do, so me, being the idiot I am, keep messaging her. It's us discussing how she was a B to me, and she's agreeing, discussing how she's very fake, and her incapability to feel human emotions like remorse, happiness, and love. I realize she's been through many things and that I am helpless and nothing can change her past. The only thing that can be changed is her attitude. It's never late to start again. Trust people again, feel happy again. I explained this to her as a last-ditch attempt. Well, guess what? That only made her laugh, and it backfired on me. Backfired on me, you'd ask? Yes. We were discussing how I didn't know what led to this lifestyle when out of the blue she sends me an interesting image. An image of a girl ran over by a truck with all her vital organs just out in the open. I feel disgusted by just remembering it. She found it interesting from a biological point of view. Being very creeped out, I try to explain how she's not normal, how looking at those kinds of things isn't okay. I ask her, what if she was that girl? And this is what frightened me the most in her response. She said, what dies or experiences the pain? If I deserved the pain, I'd do it. The next couple of days was us arguing about her being sociopathic, feeding on people's emotions and having a lot in common with SB. SB is even more effed up than her. According to one of my friends, they watch strange types of hentai together. The next day, I come home to about 20 messages, reading something like, how do you want me to kill myself? I tell her I don't want her to die. I regret knowing her and that I hope she becomes normal, but without me being her best friend. This escalates to her sending more of those images, which I prefer not to describe. It's some not safe for life content. I don't know where she got them from, and I'm grateful she stopped sending them. Furthermore, it gets out of hand to the point where she begs me not to tell the school about it because she doesn't want to go to a therapist again. 3 days later, last day of school before quarantine, we message under the table in class for a bit. I got some emotions out of her. I made her realize what kind of person she is, and she admitted. However, she is too weak to change and has adapted to this lifestyle. To conclude, what I'm left with is someone I wish I had never met in my friend group. Someone I had feelings for, but now every thought of her makes me feel disgusted. Thanks to the quarantine, I don't have to see her anytime soon. What do you guys think?
Dad left, Mom was an alcoholic. God, looking back, my childhood was depressing. Maybe not as depressing as some others. I wasn't molested, beside my uncle taking a photo of me in the shower once when I was 7. That was weird. I wasn't chained to a radiator, I wasn't starved, I wasn't frequently abused, negotiable. But my dad left when I was 2. My sister, who bullied me relentlessly when I was younger, who'd punched me on the bus and let middle schoolers drop books on my head when I was in kindergarten. We lived with my grandmother in a house that was, to say the least, a mess. Let's get this clear. We weren't hoarders. But a diagnosed ADHD 5-year-old, me, an alcoholic, a bipolar grandmother in her 70s, and a moody teenager were not, that's an understatement, good at cleaning house. The house was big and would have been beautiful if well kept. It wasn't. It smelt. There was usually trash everywhere. Playdates at my house were a no-go. Elementary school was lonely. God, it was so lonely. I had maybe 2 true friends, one at school and a neighbor whose house I'd visit frequently. I was the freak, the spaz, the girl who talked too much, the girl who was separated from the other kids and told by teachers, "You're just too stupid for this." Okay, to be fair, I was pretty horrible, I guess, but I had bad influences. Middle schoolers would curse around me, at me, on the bus. You know what I did one day in the lunch line because I was mad? I turned around and gave a girl the finger. A teacher saw and thought I was doing it to them. There was also another time where I had pushed someone for cutting me in line, and the next thing I knew, the girl was on the ground clutching her neck. Everyone claimed I choked her. I didn't. I was bullied for having a pink book bag, because femininity was such a horrible thing. My sister had joined in on the bullying. I remember swinging my book bag around and throwing it. Apparently, it hit this girl in my grade. I don't remember that. I relied on Barbies, stuffed animals, and imaginary friends for company. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. Why should I? Because they were real, right? Those adventures I went on with them happened, and of course they would never leave me. I spent a large portion of my childhood in my room, or rooms, because at my house we switched rooms a lot. I remember hearing my mom yelling at Grandma and going into my room and moving my bed to block the door. I remember the tiny TV and the DVD player I had, and I remember turning on Jurassic Park because to a first grader at the time, that was real. Dinosaurs were alive. They were here. Dr. Alan Grant and Ian Malcolm were actual people, goddammit, and maybe they would take me to go see the dinosaurs. Then the kids at school told me that Jurassic Park was fictional and dinosaurs had not indeed been brought back to life. And I didn't believe them until second grade. I used to think my dad was Ian Malcolm because Jeff Goldblum looked like how I remembered my dad. I loved my mom so much back then because I didn't realize anything was wrong with her. Just to avoid her when she started yelling, I held no personal grudges against her. It wasn't always Jurassic Park, all 3 movies. Sometimes it was Barbie or Land Before Time. At one point, it was The Hunger Games. I had a bow and arrow made of bamboo. My neighbor friend made it for me. They had bamboo trees growing in their backyard. God, at that time, that was so cool. Pretending to be Katniss Everdeen, that was a euphoric feeling. I was 7 when I realized my sister genuinely wasn't afraid to hurt me. I remember walking home from the bus stop one day with her and stopping to tie my shoe. I don't tie my shoes anymore. Not because of that. Maybe because of that. They get knotted and it's annoying. People tell me to tie my shoes constantly. I don't. She started walking, realized I stopped, grabbed my hair and pulled me across the street. Then she gave me a black eye to prove to the other middle schoolers that she was cool. I remember ignoring my mom's drunk yells and her calling for me downstairs. No, why would I be able to hear her over the dinosaur roaring in my room? Why should I put down my Barbies for her? I was 7 when I went to Seattle for the first time. I was even more lonely, honestly, because my dad, different dad than my sister, worked outside the baseball stadium selling magazines, and I would sit on the steps and wait for a shift to be over. But what was I really doing? God, I was exploring. I'd go off and talk to imaginary friends, and the one that would land outside the stadium in her own private jet. She was imaginary, so she could do that. I roamed down the apartment building halls, calling the fire escapes with my imaginary friends' apartments. I didn't even realize I was lonely. I love my dad, I do. He's tried his best and I'm so happy he's in my life now. Even though he still lives in Seattle and I see him maybe a month out of the year now, if even. But Seattle was lonely. My uncle who lived with my dad wasn't a good man. He took advantage of my dad's hospitality. He made lewd comments, he took a photo of me while I was showering, and called it a joke. I was 8 when my aunt on my mom's side made me start stacking wood for her. Oh God, I hated stacking wood. I hated that her house, with her and my extreme Christian right-wing uncle, made me and my sister go over there and stack wood. I hated that stacking wood for the stupid fire pit, and the stupid fireplace was where I would spend my summer before and after going to Seattle. I hated doing that in the heat. I hated doing that in the cold. And if we didn't do it right, we'd be up all night and wouldn't be allowed dinner until we finished. I hated stacking wood. I was 9 when I realized my mother had a problem with alcohol. She started drinking that funny tasting and smelling substance and got really weird. And then she started yelling. But that was okay because I'd go to my room and watch Jurassic Park and play with my Barbies, right? I remember her threatening my grandma, threatening my sister, threatening me. Then I stole her phone and barricaded myself in the bathroom because that was the only room in the house with a lock. I remember the first time I called the cops on my mother. They came and they couldn't really do anything. They told her if they had to come back, she'd be arrested. I was so scared I called my aunt and she came and picked us up. As much as I resented I have towards them for, child labor and a bit of child abuse, for different reasons than stacking wood, it was better than staying with my mother. Most of the time, Grandma would come with. Sometimes she refused to be kicked out of her own house. We had bed bugs. That was an understatement. God, when I had brought bed bugs down from Seattle when I came back, we had them bad. It was horrible. We had to tear up our carpet, had to throw away our furniture. Me, my sister, and my grandmother slept on air mattresses and old chairs that my aunt had given to us. Keep them, she said. You see, my issue at the time wasn't the bed bugs. Personally, that was the least of my problems. A few months prior to the start of the bed bug ordeal, my best friend at school, my only friend at school, introduced me to that stupid internet meme, Slender Man. Me in 3rd grade didn't really think of it as a meme. 9-year-old me was convinced he was real, and there was no doubt about that. I couldn't sleep. I prayed every night with my grandmother. I didn't pray before that. I don't pray now, because that tall, thin man with tentacle arms was coming to get me. My mom had a boyfriend and was going back to college. She was calming down on her drinking. I had spent most of my time at her boyfriend's house with her, since she had basically moved in with him. Those were some happy memories. He was a good cook, had a nice backyard in which I could shoot at the ground with my new plastic bow and arrow. The only time I was ever at home was on Wednesdays, when my mom had a late class. And then my mom got arrested. She called into her school, drunk, because she had not finished a paper that was due the next day, and claimed my brother was going to bomb the school. She doesn't have a brother, 3 sisters, 2 of which I've never met, no brother. It was a week after the Boston Marathon bombing. I didn't go to Seattle that summer. She spent a month in jail. I spent the last of the school year at my own house, going to my aunt's on the weekends. Then when summer came around, we practically lived at my aunt's house. I got a scholarship offer for a Girl Scout camp. I didn't take it because my impending fear of Slender Man had not faded away yet. I went from praying every night with my grandma to praying with my aunt. I remember visiting Mom in jail. I remember crying. I remember my aunt taking us for ice cream afterward to cheer us up. Maybe my aunt wasn't all that bad, just my uncle. Mom got out. I got a 3DS for my 10th birthday. It was midnight blue. God, I remember how much time I spent on that. My sister threw a hissy fit over me getting one, and she had one a week later. Mom got drunk the night of my birthday. We still had no permanent furniture. That was an issue. We got some, not all of it at once. I was only on my air mattress in a different room, playing a game. Mom was drinking. She yelled at me and dragged me into the living room, claiming she wanted me to be with family. My 10th birthday tied worst birthday ever with my 9th. I fell off a swing in Seattle and broke my arm. 4th grade, Mom went to rehab. She took me with her, as there was a special program where you could bring your children along. I was the only 4th grader there, besides the babies whose mothers didn't have anyone who could watch them. That was during the time where I really started liking books. I was reading The Hunger Games. They took my DS and I had nothing better to do. My imaginary friend had long faded away and my interest in Barbies disappeared. My only real companion was the stuffed T-Rex I had taken with me. Mom got kicked out of rehab within 2 weeks. She broke a rule. Talk to someone while she was being shunned. She called them crazy. I lived with my Nana, Dad's side, for 2 weeks. I missed school. I finished the first and second Hunger Games book in those 2 weeks. Then I found out that I was being sent off to Seattle to live with my dad. I was gonna finish 4th grade up there. As a reward for finishing the entire Hunger Games series, my mom had given me a tablet. It was an Android, off-brand of something, but I didn't care because I had a tablet. I read online, I wrote, I started realizing that I really liked writing. I had friends up there. I grew even more passionate about reading and writing. I loved going to my library because of books, but also because of the Wi-Fi that my dad didn't have at the time, with my dad. Then my tablet got stolen. I left it next to my book bag while I went to the bathroom. My dad bought me another one. He surprised me with it. I came back 6 months later, my mom telling me I would be going to a different school. My old school knew about my mom's drinking problem. She didn't like that. I lost contact with all the friends I had made in basically my lifetime up to that point. The neighborhood friend had to move. I lost touch with the Seattle kids. 5th grade was back to being incredibly lonely. My Nana died. It was her last Christmas. It was devastating. In 6th, I had one true friend, and she left school and I never saw her again. No one wanted to be friends with the tall, big girl who was called King Kong. Not until 7th grade is when I realized I had a few people that liked me. But I had books. I had those stupid Jurassic Park movies, and I finally had a phone. I'm a sophomore in high school now, and I don't rely on books or Jurassic Park or imaginary friends or Barbies for company now because I have friends. Mom still drinks, and my sister is still, in all terms I could think of, a bitch. Dad still lives in Seattle. He was here for Christmas. I didn't sleep well. I grew up lonely. I didn't realize it at the time because, well, who was I to doubt my imagination? But I was painfully alone. So alone that I relied on extensions of my imagination for company. Because the teacher said, this girl is too wild to be with kids her age. She shouldn't talk. Because my mom was so drunk off her ass, I isolated myself without even realizing I was isolated. Refusing to cook the kind of food my husband. So let me preface this by saying that I was overweight when I met my husband. Also, before I started working from home, I, a female of 28, didn't really care about how healthy our meals were. I cooked comfort food most of the time with little thought regarding calories, and my husband, a male who's 41, loved everything I made. I think it's part of the reason he fell for me, to be honest. Since I started working from home, I now have an extra 2 hours a day as I'm no longer commuting and have used it to start exercising. My family has a history of high blood pressure, and it hit home for me just recently that it's time to get in shape. My husband was supportive at first, but as I've started to really lose weight, he's become less so. He's always bringing home junk food, which would be fine if he wanted it just for himself, but he tries to pressure me into eating it as well. My husband is a mailman and walks 15 miles a day, so he's in better shape than I am. His dinners used to consist of 2 or 3 helpings of whatever unhealthy food I made that day. Lately, I've been making healthier choices when it comes to our food. My husband can't cook to save his life, and the grocery shopping and all cooking is done by me. When I say healthier choices, I don't mean tofu and kale. I mean that I've started cooking our favorite foods, but with healthier alternatives, like using 1% milk instead of heavy cream and adding veggies. Since I've started doing this, my husband has doubled his efforts in trying to get me to stop working on my health. He still has his normal 2 to 3 helpings, so the food can't taste that bad. It's gotten to the point where I don't even share with him anymore if I reach a new goal because he gets all surly. It all came to a head last night when I made a casserole and added broccoli and used a lighter sauce. He flipped out and said I'm trying to push my get better looking agenda off on him, even though my efforts to get in shape have nothing to do with how I look. He then accused me of being sick of him and using my workouts as an excuse to get away from him, which is completely untrue. I enjoy our time together, and my workouts right now are only 40 minutes because it's all I can manage, so I'm not leaving him alone that long. He then said that he would drop it if I would go back to cooking and eating the way I used to. I told him that he was more than welcome to cook the way he wanted, but he refused and left in a huff. While he was gone, I called my sister to try to get some perspective. She sided with my husband and said I was being TA by not providing him with the fuel he needs for his physically intensive job, even though the cooking I'm making now is more nutrient dense than it was before, and that just because cooking was one of my tasks in the relationship didn't mean I should be the only one with any say in how things are made. I'm a 19-year-old female. My 22-year-old boyfriend does not want me being friends with my guy friends. I'm a tomboy girl who plays a lot of video games and has a tendency to get along better with guys because of this, and of my more laid-back personality. I have a really hard time making friends that are girls. Most of the friends I did have would lie and backstab and spread secrets about me, and 9 times out of 10, I would have a big falling out because I would eventually get mad or upset and not be able to take it anymore, and everyone would end up hating me and shunning me from the group of girls. So I have a hard time trusting girls because of this. My friend group consisted of me, another girl, and 3 guys. My friend who is a girl, we will call her Amy, I have known since high school. She introduced me to one of the guys, who in turn introduced me and Amy to the rest of the group. My boyfriend and I have been together for about 10 months now. Since the beginning, he has known I have close guy friends. In the beginning, he put on the front that he was okay with this, but gradually became more expressive about how this bothered him and upset him. Out of the group, I was closest with Amy and one of the guys, we will call Kevin, and I talked to the both of them regularly through texting. Kevin has helped me through a lot and has talked me through more problems than I could think of. To me, it was important that my boyfriend met Amy and Kevin because they were two of the most important people in my life at the time. When Kevin was scheduled to take leave, my boyfriend absolutely refused to meet him, told me he would never like him and that he would never be okay with our friendship. His reasoning was that guys and girls can never just be platonically friends. I even tried to explain how Kevin had feelings for Amy and everything to try and show him Kevin was not interested in me. After a while, I began to feel guilty and beat myself up over having guy friends, and eventually began nitpicking the things I didn't like in a way to convince myself to not be their friend. At the end, I didn't reach out to them as much, and they hardly, if ever, reached out to me. Fast forward to a couple months later, and I am working at this new job and trying to make friends. I'm still in touch with Amy, though not very close since she is opinionated and I often do not agree with her opinions, which in turn causes her to get mad at me. I'm pretty much seeking out girls at this point to be friends with, because I do genuinely want friends that are girls so they could relate with me to the things my guy friends couldn't, but also because I know it wouldn't put a strain on my relationship. Where I work, not many girls work there, so I tried to make friends with who I could, and lo and behold, they are all guys. It makes me hate myself because I feel terrible for only being friends with guys, and I know it drives my boyfriend crazy, and I want nothing more than for him to be happy, but I just cannot have friends. I ended up becoming close to a guy we will call Dale, and now he has become practically my only friend and the only person I really talk to other than my boyfriend. Well, my boyfriend tried to put on the front that he was okay with it and he was going to meet him, but the day before he met him, my boyfriend got upset and told me he didn't like it. I tried my best to comfort him, explaining how I only have eyes for him and that I will never be friends with a guy if I genuinely thought they would be disrespectful towards my relationship. But in the end, I basically agreed to not talk to him anymore, or at least as much. Well, this weekend, my boyfriend had a plan to go hang out with his friends for the weekend about an hour away, and usually it's just him and two other guys, but now it's his normal two friends and two more guys he usually doesn't hang out with. They like to drink and go to bars and clubs typically, but they can't do any of that because of the coronavirus. They also used to smoke weed together, but since my boyfriend has quit, just his friends do it even when he's there. I have never been a big drinker or partier and have been in bad situations where people force drinking and weed on me. I don't mind drinking with my boyfriend to cut loose a little, but my boyfriend never wants to drink with me. This has made it all that much harder for me to accept him drinking with his friends because he just never will drink with me. It hurts my feelings and I've brought it up before, but he just seems to make excuses as to why he won't. I've never been comfortable with any of it, but I knew it made him happy, so I always supported him. Now that he's made it hard for me to be friends with the people I want to be friends with, I have a hard time supporting the things he wants to do that I don't like because I don't have his support. I expressed I was upset he was going and I have nothing to do or no one to talk to because he had a problem with my friends. I got mad, I got sad, I got stressed, I cried, and he offered not to go, but I would never be the girlfriend who would ask him not to see his friends. He went to see his friends, and now I feel so hurt and angry and resentful towards him for going because I know that if he had expressed how upset he was, he wouldn't have had to ask me not to go. I just wouldn't have. I texted him explaining how I was mad and hurt and that I didn't know if I could speak to him right now. And all he said was he didn't know how upset I was, even though I literally told him. I feel like he gets to do whatever he wants, but I can't do what makes me happy. I know he loves me and I love him very much, but I'm just hurt and confused. I don't want to make either of us unhappy, but I feel like either we both get what we want or neither of us get what we want. Will only be the solutions, but they really don't feel like solutions. I need help.